I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So roll call will show that all directors are present. And I already reported that there was no political action during the closed session. So I'd like to look at the agenda. Item number 5. The agenda?
We're on approval of the agenda, right?
Yeah, or any additions or?
Well, I have a question on 14 and 15, since there is some financial issues concerned. It was not on the financial committee's agenda this week. So I would really like to know if we can carry it over, either next Wednesday, and maybe we could just meet like right before the meeting, but these are both items that concern finances for the district, and I think the finance committee should review them.
I believe that the item 14, even though the contract, the amendment was not in front of the finance committee, I believe maybe the concept of it was, because I went back to review finance committee notes from the last agenda, and I think there was mention in the finance notes, or maybe it was in the general manager's report. I believe it was in the finance committee's report, not from this last meeting, but the meeting before, that it was reviewed, because I was trying to find out more information about it.
But what I think we're hearing is that this is an item the board would like to have continued for the next regular meeting.
Right. Is there any downside? I mean,
No.
does CMSA need this thing this week?
Right.
No.
Yeah. So then.
And we don't even have to put a date certain, just continue.
Well, let's continue it.
All right,
Yeah, it might be.
do a motion to
Okay,
continue.
just very quickly, so Pam, though, you had also included item 15.
Yes, this is about benefits.
Right.
This also includes a financial or potential.
We can certainly bring that back. another
Yeah,
day.
we have some figures that are in the back.
Okay.
That are revealing the finances up to $70,000. So
Okay.
that's okay.
It's not a time-sensitive item.
Okay.
It's something we can certainly bring back at the next regular meeting.
So, Peter?
Oh, I don't care. By the time it gets back, I will no longer be on this board.
Well, next week. So
No,
15 can be continued to the next regular meeting, and I think 14 can be, make a motion to just continue the item to a date uncertain, because we don't know when we'll be bringing it back.
So
That's fair.
we're going to pull it from the
14.
agenda.
Yeah.
Pull both of them from the agenda.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay.
And make a motion.
Make a
continue
motion.
it.
Well, maybe that one more comment.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion.
Wait. Frank is coming.
So, when we had Ronald Caldwell here, and we did an RFP, we didn't have the numbers, we didn't have he said he was gonna get specific figures,
Cost estimate.
cost estimates. I thought it was gonna come back to us one more time and then go out once we had the cost estimates, but then,
No, well, if I remember correctly, Frank, it was last month's meeting during the draft budget discussion, it was noted that the updated numbers for the Magnolia trunk line were not yet in.
right.
We were waiting for a final engineer's estimate, and the direction from the board was to bring back that estimate just so we knew it was in the budget. But the direction to go ahead, as I understand it, was to put the project out for construction bid. And
Okay.
that's my understanding.
But they don't have any estimates out.
They do, it's in your package, there's an updated
Well, I saw
estimate.
that update.
Yeah.
So, have people picked up bids or have they been?
Is Randall in here? I'm a little unclear, we've started, I'm not sure it started advertising yet.
Okay.
It may not have, I'll have to
Okay,
double check.
So we need a motion on item 14 and one on 15.
Sorry.
I don't know that Brown Caldwell is handling that for us, so our
Right.
staff would be involved in doing the postings.
Okay, I'll check, Frank, I'm not sure, but we had direction to go ahead and advertise for construction, and there's an informational item with the updated cost estimate.
Okay.
All right, so we need a motion for
14
those
and a
two.
motion for 15. Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to pull agenda items 14 and 15 for continuance to next board meeting.
No, 14 to continue it to a date uncertain, and 15 to the next regular meeting.
Okay, to pull agenda item 14 to a date uncertain and agenda item 15 to the next regular RBSD board meeting.
Second,
Second.
Westbrook Sullivan, all those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, and the direction on number 15 was to go to finance committee review, I believe, wasn't
We're going
that?
to try and
Do
try and
something.
have some kind of informal finance committee meeting next
You know,
week.
I was looking to see how much their interest they were paying us for that. 4%?
I think that's the long-term commitment under CalPERS in terms of the OPEB trust. They're assuming a 4% return, right?
4% annually?
That's what I understand.
As opposed to 7.5.
Yeah.
Mosquito district has got 1.5%.
I guess
so
reality smacked them upside the head.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
But
no, I
CalPERS,
understand why.
It's the same
Yeah.
program.
I could double check, but I'm almost positive it listed 4%, which I thought was a bit high.
We'll get to talk about that next week, yes?
Yes.
Okay, all right, any other changes to the agenda? Anyone in the public have any comment on the agenda? Okay,
I'd
back
like
to
to
the
move
board.
the agenda
Thank
As
you.
amended.
as amended.
That's amended. Wasco Egger, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, open time for public to raise items not on the agenda or for future agendas. Does anyone in the public have any public comments?
Should we put a speaker in the other room across the street, maybe?
That's where they are.
There's a lot of public comment going on with everything tonight. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 7, standing committees report out. Those are finance and human resources. We'd like to report out on the finance committee meeting.
Well,
Finance, yeah, and campaign
when
short
do I
chair.
report on the North Bay watershed? Is that the end of the meeting?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. I'll get my- Well, I think a lot of it's gonna come up when we get into the item, but we met for an hour and a half, a little over an hour and a half. For the finance committee, I didn't have a whole lot of issues. The one thing that I did ask was, I know we did this the debt restructuring, and we have not spent it all. It was $2 million left over, and we went into the reasons why, which Greg helped process, which was saying that we had to slow down the packages that we had created for the CIP. We had Group A and Group B, and it took longer for the RFPs. And also,
It's the term leftover that's a problem.
leftover?
Yeah, it's committed but not spent.
Committed, just not
I don't like
spent.
the word leftover.
Well, that's what we were pointing out, yeah.
And then dealing with the cease and desist and the IMP slowed the process down. That was a lot of staff issues and time and all that. And then also on your item, Greg, you said combining life work projects for the future. I'm not sure. Oh, that's where we're going to go from now on, so that we
Right.
don't get into this kind
So
of,
we're more efficient,
yeah.
yeah.
So that's what I wanted to tell the board is the money still will be spent by August, even though it is not fully spent. $2 million will be spent. There was a correction that I believe Director Sullivan found that you have in a memo next to you, and we'll go over that later, but this handout draft is a correction
It's
on
corrected.
the resolution.
Came back correctly.
Yes, good idea. We also talked about potential looking at grants. That was just kind of a discussion, and that we really need to get a strategic plan up and moving as soon as possible. And we have allocated money for that. I think that's kind of.
Can I add one quick question related to the grants question? We do have, I always forget Harry's last name.
Oh, it's a long name.
He's the head of, well, I forget his exact title, he's like the executive officer or whatever of the North Bay Watershed Association. And he's the one that really runs it at the staff level, so to speak. He's extremely knowledgeable about state and federal grant programs, very up to date on what's happening with their programs and with the North Bay Water Reuse Association also. So just to give you a heads up, he's tentatively scheduled to speak just informationally to the board at the July meeting. So if you have questions and big picture questions about, how we should or could go about looking at grants, Mary's an excellent resource. Because that's basically how the North Bay Watershed Association and the North Bay Water Reuse Association operate. Most of their funding at the end of the day comes from state and federal grants. It's not locally generated money. So they're very successful at it, so he's a great resource.
He's going to be here.
Yeah, Frank, he's just going to speak. We asked him to just come speak to the board again, just informationally. We're members of North Bay Watershed Association now, and Harry does a great job of talking about what they're doing.
Sarah Darian.
Thank you.
His
So
last
that's
name.
Sarah Darian or something.
So I'm not going to go into all the questions that I asked at the meeting, because I think I'd rather just wait until we all talk about it. Peter, do you have anything?
Well,
to add?
we reviewed this year's spending, which is almost done. We're 11 and a half months into it, and compared it to next year's budget. And we took a look, we'll talk about it more tonight, but we took a look at the proposed budget for next year, which includes the bond funding, and we discussed how much we could actually do, what was reasonable for us as an agency to try and do in terms of capital. And Greg will probably talk more about that later on, but there is a limit on how much we can do based on the personnel we have available and the projects and services, et cetera.
Thank you. Pat, do you want to
HR
talk
committee? Okay, well, when we met last evening, we met for about an hour, but what we covered was, the most recent contract that we had looked at, that RGS presented to us at our last board meeting. So the required changes, or the requested changes, have been embedded in the new contract. We learned that the contract would be for the fiscal period 14-15, and that some key components of that contract included several disciplines that covered areas that spoke to performance management, administrative policies and systems, long-range staffing plans. The 2015 labor negotiations, at least a lot of the information that would come into those negotiations, and of course, as it relates to staff strategic planning issues. We also covered some items that spoke to our, let's see, which one was that? Sorry guys, I don't have that nature.
New board orientation?
Yeah, new board orientation, that's it, thank you. So, we threw the ball around on that and realized that, that's a pretty concentrated effort on one particular board policy, in the sense that, it's orientation, but it's also more than that, and there's a bit to it. So, I kept saying, gee, we have board books, we have some other things that give board members when they first come in. That's not a bad way to open the door, still. But as far as the long-term need, because it's a learning curve, it takes a while to get used to what is really required of us. Greg made some great suggestions regarding the special district vehicle, that we have at our disposal because we're members, and a lot of the services they provide through Brett Ives and his capable staff is teaching board members what their job is. So it's fairly simplistic to be able to organize it through these kinds of organizations, I guess. That's what I'm saying. But it was a short meeting and productive. That's my report. So Mary, do you have any feedback?
Well, and then also, when we talked about new board member orientation, we moved into talking about, board training that I think we could all benefit from. I know I in particular, because I came on in a sort of tumultuous time of the district, that I got the binders and that was it. So maybe looking at what started as new board member orientation as a training that we could all take advantage of over the next few months. So staff is going to be working on bringing us something back about that.
We are, and we had a roughly 2-hour discussion about that topic today, so there's a whole bunch of good work going, all of which will come back to vet before we actually do anything. But it's just meant to help make sure that the new board members get off to a good start, have all the resources they need, and it will also start to touch on the expectations and scheduling things like strategic planning and so forth. So it's a good range of items that will be coming your way.
Is this from our staff, or is this something that we would just kind of pick that's already, like,
As far as strategic
eyes
planning,
has got all this training?
most of the training for that type of stuff, Pam, we're purposely going to look to someone like Brent. We're not experts. He does this for a living. So.
For the cities, many California cities put on conferences for new city mayors or council
Right.
members. Does CASA have something for new sewer board members?
Well, I think I'm not sure on the details, Frank, but this is what we talked about today, between CASA, League of California Cities, CSBA, we know that there's an abundance of really good training opportunities, and we just want to identify them and just kind of schedule them. But the League of Cities was actually one we talked about today.
Yeah, that's in January.
All right. Is there any public comment on the standing committees report out? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Item number 8. Does anyone have any items from the consent calendar that they'd like to pull?
I spent a lot of time reading those minutes.
No?
I was laying on the beach and you were at 3-hour meeting.
No, you're lucky.
Easier to live through them?
Well, I read every word.
Great. All right, any public comment on the consent calendar? Then I'll bring it back to the board.
I'd like to move the consent calendar.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Wasco, Egger, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Item number 9, consideration of adopting resolution 14-1478, approving the fiscal year 2014 budget. Greg.
Okay, I will do a brief introduction. This is the second time the budget's come back to. It was the draft budget last month, and this is being presented as the final proposed budget. We have myself, we have Julie, we have Wendy. So I think we have all the technical resources that are denying the report you have in front of you. And just as a quick side note, which I think everyone's already aware, you have a corrected copy of the budget adoption resolution, should you choose to actually vote on that this evening. So we caught a couple of minor mistakes. Thank you, Peter, for seeing those. The staff report is very brief because we did go through the budget, the draft budget, in much more detail at last month's meeting, and the direction for updates and changes to it were fairly modest. And I'll touch on those in a moment, but let me just, again, provide a very high-level overview. You have the full report in front of you. The 14-15 budget fully funds all of the planned operations and maintenance activities for the district. It fully funds the planned capital projects. It does reflect the issuance of an approximately $40 million bond issuance dedicated exclusively to the capital program. And it also reflects the financial impact of the approval of the 5-year rate schedule last month. So obviously those are kind of really the cornerstones, however you want to put it, the foundation of the whole budget. Within each of the major spending and income areas, very briefly, I don't want to go into a lot of detail. Operations and maintenance is basically, fairly steady. Our major cost centers are personnel and the CMSA treatment costs, and those are both fairly stable and predictable, so we don't expect big changes in them. And same when you look at operations and maintenance revenue, which for us really is rate revenue. We know what our rate revenue is. We set the rate, and it's very predictable, so there's not a lot of uncertainty there. We are projecting a minor, I think just a slightly minor positive balance at the end of the fiscal year. Those monies will go, basically into the reserves. We can talk more about that later. On the capital side, there is actually about roughly about $15 million in what I would call construction work being funded. That's pipes in the ground, etc. The total capital budget is closer to about 20 because it reflects the debt service, and it also reflects some non-construction capital activities, some of the various studies and so forth. But I point that out because I know we've talked in the past, and it's a remaining concern about our ability to deliver capital projects. And I think what we mostly mean by that is construction. We're not so worried about, a study here, a study there. Those are pretty easy to turn over to a consultant. But when you talk about, say, a $4 or $5 million construction project, now your staff commitments and so forth are much more substantial, and then you are touching on the concerns of what's our ability to push those projects through the system. So the number this year coming up is, I want to say it's between $15 and $16 million. That's mostly made up by a handful of very large projects, which is good from an efficiency perspective, because the more we are consolidating, the less amount of time we're spending administering contracts and so on and so forth. And there's just economies of scale in terms of how the contractors execute the work as well. Clearly, most of the capital budget expenditures are being covered by the bond issuances. As Pam, or to follow up on her earlier question, as we go into the new fiscal year, we'll be finishing up some of the projects that are being funded by the prior bond issuance, and then that will be done. All of that money will be spent, every dime will be accounted for to a capital project, and as we've been showing you in the new quarterly report format. The bond issuance is going to fund most of this new fiscal year's program and the next 2 fiscal years' programs. So obviously, when you look at the summary numbers for the fiscal year, you're going to see, oh, we have a ton of money in the bank at the end of the year. Yes, we do, because we're going to do a $40 million bond issuance, but it's funding 3 years for the capital project. So I think everyone's pretty clear on that. The bond issuance process itself, we have purposely avoided talking about it. We didn't want to be presumptive about anything. That we are in a pretty good cash position at the moment as a result of all the past actions. So we do have a little bit of breathing room on the timing. We don't have to sit the new board down on July, whatever that is, and say, here, start signing these bond documents, which is good. We've got some time to work with that. So we're ending up the current fiscal year in very good shape, which I really want to note, because I think it reflects the combined actions of everything that the board and the district has done over the past basically year and a half to get to that point. Okay, I think I'll stop there as far as the new budget. I'm sorry, one last thing. The specific changes that were requested were noted, comments that were noted during the review of the draft budget. One was a request to add funds for at least jump-starting or getting us going on strategic planning. We have done that. We've put, I believe, $30,000 in the budget. It's, in my view, more than enough to get us started. And we can kind of see how it goes because strategic planning can take a lot of different directions. But with $30,000 in funding and the right approach, I have no doubt we get pretty far down the road. And then we can kind of see what we need to do.
That was very wise of you.
Well, it was Pam's suggestion.
There's a board member who seems interested in strategic planning now.
It's extremely timely. The other thing was, because of the timing of the work on the Magnolia trunk line project, we were still waiting for the final engineer's cost estimate. We had a placeholder in the draft budget. It turned out to be not too far off, but the final number for the construction cost estimate is an informational item, and it is which information item?
Between 3741.
Thank you, information item C. Okay, and as Charlie Joyce mentioned when he was here, they had the unfortunate luck of having a cost estimator put on them at a bad time. So they were able to finally pull this together. And you have a total cost, basically, it's still slightly arranged because we'll see what, what the contractors, have up their sleeve as far as good construction ideas. We put it at $3.5 to $4.1 million. So still within range of what we budgeted for the project. We've known it was going to have a bit of uncertainty until it got through design. So the takeaway from that is the budget being proposed this evening does have the appropriate funding for the most up-to-date cost estimate for the construction on the Magnolia trunk line.
Well, but if you may just.
Yeah, please, ma'am.
So when we let the contract to Brown Polo, they were gonna do some large diameter pipe inspections.
Separate project, but yes, it's a different contract, but there is one.
Was it the same area or different area?
Different area.
Different area.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. They are focused, well, yeah, short answer is.
That's all right.
So, can I ask a question?
Okay, so actually, I'm done.
All right, now I'll bring it back.
Okay, so I have some scope questions that I've been thinking about this since we talked about 2 days ago. If the total capital that we're going to spend next year is 22 million roughly, and we can continue on at that pace, or maybe even have to do more, then that's 66 million over 3 years. We've got 40 million penciled in bonds, which leaves another 26 million in capital that has to come from somewhere. We get about 15 million in ad valorem tax over the 3 years, which still leaves about 10 million short if we're going to do all the capital programs we think we're going to do over 3 years. So there may be some squeezing at the end there. The third year, I'm not going to be here, but the third year of this cycle, there may not be enough capital to do all the things.
There'll be a second bond issuance.
So that won't be till the fourth year.
It can be the fourth year.
But it may be
We
earlier.
have some flexibility on it. Yeah,
All right. I'll just.
Yeah.
Will you be available for any consultation?
I am by phone.
On my phone. Okay. Does anyone need Peter's number?
He's kidding. Are my numbers right?
Oh, this is a technical
Yeah.
question. Randy's not here, but John might be able to answer. In your bid schedule, just your estimate, your layout for linear footage page. Well, it's bid schedule, and it's 00310-1. I see you have your lump sums, your linear footage, approximate length, footage of pipeline replaced, so forth. A 21-inch inner diameter sewer main is being replaced with a 22-inch outer diameter HDPE line. So the inner diameter.
Mr. Ishii is walking up the road now.
Randy?
I see him in the distance. There's parking out here has been terrible.
It has less.
And so I have a feeling to
Well, I
park
know
away.
there's a less of a challenge with man's coefficient, I'm sure, but I'm just kind of curious if that's an 18-inch inner diameter pipe.
I don't know about the inner diameter, but the original SheCat assumed that that was a 10-inch line and recommended upsizing to 15-inch. So I believe this line is still going to be larger than what was recommended in the original SheCat from years ago.
I don't doubt it for a minute.
Do you think that
I'm still kidding.
HD pipe is 2 inches thick?
Perhaps, it might be, if it's 21 inches, 22 inches outer diameter. I bet you Harrison Associates knows.
Yeah, I mean, the 40.
Yes, in fact, for a diameter like that,
Schedule
the site
11.
dimension ratio should be about 21. So for a 21-inch pipe, the wall thickness should be 1 inch with a DR 20. So it's probably a little bit thicker than that. So it's going to
DR20.
be close to 1.5 inches, I would think.
So 3
Just
inches
curious,
off of
19 to
22.
18 inches inner diameter, something like that.
Okay.
All right, just,
So we're not replacing 21 inch with a 22, we're replacing it.
so not DR 11.
That's a pretty thick wall.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So if it's a 15, then we're getting close to maybe 2 inches, inch and 3/4.
Depends on how deep you put it in.
You're very knowledgeable. You know about dimension ratios and things, that's.
Standard dimension ratio. Hey,
That's-
Randy,
That's his job.
22-inch outer diameter HDPE is how much inner diameter? How much is, what is
What's
the inner
the
diameter?
DR on it?
We don't have a DR on here.
So we're not gonna.
Okay, no.
This is the budget
I
item.
still believe
Well, you know, I love engineering.
That's the
We're gonna
fun
miss you.
stuff.
No, I mean, really.
Not
Yeah.
part, it's not part of the budget.
All right, any other questions from my left? Frank?
Oh. I've got a ton of them, I don't want to take up too much
You
time.
want me to go?
Oh, I broke the ice for you, Frank.
Huh?
I broke the ice for you.
I know, that's good, that's good. Okay, okay, let me ask some questions then. Hmm. So you think we can put 16, 18 million dollars in the ground in 1 year?
16.
13?
Yes, we can get pretty close,
Just see.
but yes. Yes. Well, there's a couple of things, in all seriousness, that we have in our favor. So first of all, we've got, we are making, I think, steady improvements in our project delivery process. So that means, how we're handling the contracts, how much we're bundling the work so it's done more efficiently. Basically, this year's monies are made up really of essentially 3 or 4 primary projects, some of which are already underway.
So Magnolia's one.
Yeah, exactly, Frank. So Magnolia is one of them.
34 million.
Construction for Magnolia is going to be hitting in. The project we'll be talking about later this evening is quite fast track. It's the fiscal year 14-15 gravity sewer work. That's going to be about somewhere between 4 to 4.5, 5 million. We're going to see the big bills start to hit finally on the large diameter condition assessment, because that work's really been in the pre-planning stages right now, and the heavy lifting on it's going to get going. The design will get going on pump stations 12 and 13. Now that is not the big dollars, because the big dollars are in construction, but it's still fairly sizable. And then there's one other project, which is a fairly discrete project, but it does have a fairly high dollar value. And I don't need to go into too much detail without going into the capital program. There's a key piece of pipe underneath the Bon Air Shopping Center that has the potential, it actually was put there originally, to cross-connect 2 of our key force mains for operational flexibility. We don't use that pipe any longer because of the condition, and it's Techite pipe, so we purposely have not used it. So what this project is doing, and it's one that came out of the IMP and other planning, is it's basically preserves, the idea is to inspect that Techite, and if it's good, basically restore it through a CIPP trenchless replacement, I think. Or
Correct.
Replaced?
Yes.
Most likely it's a blind mistake.
Right. So my point is, basically, somewhere around 5 big projects, 2 of which are already underway, 3 of which is imminent. So our momentum is really starting to build. And that's why I feel confident. One other thing I'll show you, if you look at this month's interim financials, sorry, I have a point I'll make on why I'm taking you back there. If you look at, if you give me 1 second, I don't mean to.
You want to look at this one with the monthly
Yeah,
cash
thank you.
requirements of
Thank
the
you.
current financial.
Thank you.
Page 8 of 8.
If you-
My word.
So this is this year's financials, okay, and it's in your interim financials, and again, I apologize to take a bigger part of the budget factor for the reason. As was pointed out during the earlier discussion, this year is just about done, so we know what our history is. And if you look at specifically at line 38 of that table, even with all of the problems and the distractions we've had this year, dealing with the CDO, doing 2 packages for gravity sewer instead of 1, having to produce the IAMP, we've had half a dozen major distractions this year. I shouldn't call them distractions. Half a dozen major other priorities drawing on the same staff's time.
And
But
with
even-
expert work you're all doing.
Right, and so with that, but with those conditions, we have had one, 2, 3, 4 months where we've done over $1 million in expenditures. And we have about another 4 to 5 where we've done at least $750,000 a month. So my point is, even with all of the other priorities that took us away, that will not likely be there this year, we're up in our production capability. I mean, it's getting close. It's going to be a stretch, Frank. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. These guys, specifically Randall and Catherine Hayden, who's not here, have heard this from me. I mean, we can only have so many priorities at a time. We've had some heavy ones going. One of my next, going into the new fiscal year, one of my top 2 or 3 with staff is going to be working with those guys on basically continuing to improve our project delivery so we can get this work out the door in a steady way without having people blow a gasket. Because that's the other way to do it. But we don't want to do it that way. So it's a commitment we're making to the board, and we plan to live up to it. So there's that. But the concerns are well founded. I'm not going to tell you that it's not going to be a challenge.
So I'll just kind of thumb through some of this and make a few comments. On the strategic plan, most agencies I've sat on have done their strategic plans. Some have spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
Most of them, they're forgotten within a year of completing,
Gathered up.
and they never come back again.
Yeah.
So I kind of really wonder if we are wasting time and effort and money on a strategic plan. It's great if you don't know where you've been and where you're going.
Yeah.
Well, this agency surely by now knows where it's been and where it needs to go. I don't know
Yeah.
if we get a strategic plan. But
Well,
anyway,
what's great about a strategic plan is every 5 years you reevaluate where you've gotten, and then you, of course, set new goals. So it's a great critical tool for assessing exactly what you're up to.
on 1 of 20, we're still using a population of 55,000. And I'm thinking that's including San Quentin. I'm just throwing this out as we're going through.
You may have mentioned that before.
Because we were using 55 when I came on board.
Yeah.
And we
yeah.
lost San Quentin. But maybe we'll get it back, so maybe it'll be back up. to
What
55.
page are you
Well, that was just page 1 of 20.
on? Okay.
We meant to add a clarifying note to that, Frank, because you did note that last time as well, so that was an oversight, catching that, so.
Look just at page 3. So let me just say this, and this is not an action thing tonight. I'm just concerned about oversight of an agency that has a lot of bonded indebtedness. Most cities have what they call the Citizens Oversight Committee on bonding. This agency will have sold $57.9 million for the bonds in a couple of years. And I'm thinking we need a Citizen Oversight Committee to come in here, maybe meet a couple times a year, look at what we've got planned, and then look at what was done, accomplished, and be kind of eyes and ears to the community, other than us. We've got a staff, we've got 5 board members, and that's it. How many people live here? 50,000 at least. So, and we're trying to build confidence in our agency. And cities use this all the time. They use a bond oversight committee to assist them. So I'm just throwing that out there. And we're talking about bonding. I'm thinking perhaps we need to do an RFP for bond management and sales. The last bonding company that we finished with, they came in under the Brett Richards administration. And we just continued them for this last bonds we put out, 17.9 million. They have certain fees. I'm thinking that maybe we need to look at the possibility of an RFP, we should probably advertise it, RFP for bond counsel. I'm just throwing that out there.
Make a better raise. That's good on that.
Too much interest rates.
On page 6 of 20, I'm just highlighting. Is the third paragraph, management and confidential employees as well as significant increases of cost of health insurance. Now, do the management and confidential employees have the same contract as the union employees?
There are two separate contracts active at the district.
I know there's two separate contracts. Does theirs mirror?
Yes.
In many ways, they do, Frank,
Okay.
yes, they do.
So they all get the same raises?
The COLA adjustments, I believe, are the same, and definitely the benefits are the same.
So the COLA for Secretary Bay Area, the CPI, I think was 2.1% this year. And of course, we're giving it 4% to our employees.
I believe so.
Okay, so $500,000 for rolling stock, vehicles and equipment. That's a lot. Are we buying? We've been buying some pretty good equipment for the past few years. We still need a lot more, is it?
What we're covering there, the key items are we're getting two, what we refer to as Harbin units, and that's the brand name. And what we're basically doing is going away from the great big like Vector combo units you see around, because for a very simple reason that for our service area, they don't work. They're too big, they don't have the right equipment, you can't get them up in the easements. So most of the, well, I should say most, a lot of districts with our type of topography and mostly smaller lines, like in the 6 to 8 inch range, are going to smaller units with hoses that can be carried up hillsides easily by the crews. They're just much, much more efficient units. So I think we are also getting basically what we call a box truck, a box van to continue to support. The guys that are doing the point repairs right now, they're working out of the back of a I don't know, at least a 20-plus-year-old pickup truck, basically. And they can't work in the weather, and it basically is really, so there's a box van. This is a short
Similar to the
version.
Mercedes one we have?
It'd be I think a similar in concept. I don't know if it'll have to be a Mercedes. I know that's a sort of people.
But they actually make good trucks.
They do.
That's expensive.
Yeah, but those are the key items, Frank.
Okay.
Those are the key items.
Okay. So we're looking at any kind of energy efficiency or greenhouse gas emissions issue with the vehicles, or
These, well, actually, that's a good, not quite the way you're, I think, going, but we can come back to that in a minute. One of the other things that is driving our fleet is if you guys, take a look out at the Larkspur Landing, you'll see we kind of have a lot of very, very old vehicles out there. Some of the heavy ones too, like the small dump trucks. Those are basically going to be illegal pretty quick. The California Resources Board has been phasing out the older diesels for almost since at least I think around 2006, if not earlier now. So that's been another driver for retiring some of our vehicles. One quick comment on fleet. This is a little bit of a digression, and it's not directly in the budget, but we are in what I would call very informal sort of exploratory discussions with some of our fellow governments, local governments, to see if we can basically professionalize and have them, someone who already has a full-blown fleet management program, essentially do it for us under contract. So things like this aren't.
What, like the county or somebody?
It could be the county, it could be City Santa Fe, We need to be an agency with the appropriate resources and so on, but that's something we're exploring.
MMWD, maybe?
Yeah, exactly, Frank. People that have big equipment, similar resources to the district. Yeah, so far, and again, I want to stress, these are really preliminary staff level only. The response has been very promising. So hopefully this fiscal year, we're bringing you back an actual fleet management program that doesn't leave these things kind of wide open, like when we replace vehicles and so forth.
Will we sell any of these?
Yeah,
Big
some
vehicles
of
we
the
have?
old ones will be sold. The problem is, because of CARB rules, you can't sell them in California. So you basically have to find someone who's almost willing to take them as
And then
salvage.
retrofit them and take them for
Yeah,
containment.
yeah. And this is something that all the utilities are dealing with, everyone.
But I think our big back trucks are pretty new.
They're pretty new. That one's not going anywhere. The
Oh, you're
Peterbilt.
keeping those?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
we have the Peterbilt. These are some of the really old, like the yellow, if you see the yellow trucks, the yellow dump trucks, things like that, because most of our new
real
ones are
old.
white.
Yeah.
Easy way to tell the old stuff is it's yellow. That's,
And you can't get that up in the
yeah,
hill.
you can't get that from us, no. Which I've seen.
You can't get the new back up the hills either.
Wait a minute, well, the yellow truck's a mini dump truck, but the Vacon can make it up in the hills, I think what he's talking about is the easements.
So you gotta be pretty brave to even get it up in the hills.
So I've got to ask the question, so are we going to be converting from continuous rotting machines to strictly using high pressure jetting equipment? to clean these?
Well, that's a good question, and it's definitely relevant, I guess, to Frank, to your question, why we're making the investments in the rolling stock. Short answer is yes. We expect to have rotting eventually become something that, and John could speak
Once
to
the
this better.
system's replaced?
No, even sooner. We're actually now shifting most of our cleaning, the zone cleaning that's going on now is steadily moving towards the majority of it being done without rotters. We have like anywhere from 5 to 10 times more productivity using the flushers. We're getting the same results because we're going back and videoing. So the goal is to go, this is a little bit of detail, but we have 3 rotters right now. Probably over the next couple of years, we want to phase down to 1 rotter that we keep, because there are situations when the rotter is still the way to go. But the rotters are not going to be used for significant amounts of regularly scheduled cleaning. They're too inefficient, they're too dangerous, they have a lot of disadvantages. So the new equipment, and we can bring you guys numbers on the productivity. Well, John, the other John, basically our cleaning productivity on the system has gone up.
Yeah, you can get it done quicker, I agree.
Yeah.
But my only problem is if, I mean, everybody knows industry averages for linear footage of cleaning, and a rotter's never going to keep up with the jetter.
Right.
My worry is that we're not going to be effectively trapping what we're pulling down the system and removing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're not going to replace your system completely for quite some time.
Right.
And in steep situations, I worry about debris coming out after the fact or even during, and then going, creating a diversion of water because of the jetting up a lateral or whatever. And I'm just kind of curious if any of that's happening in the field right now because of jetting. And I'm not a big fan of reverse jetting.
Yeah. I'd have to defer, to.
Yeah, well, I shouldn't get involved with this stuff, but
Yeah.
because if it's a success story, I want to know all about it.
Right.
If it's not a success story, I want to know all about it.
Well, we're not, and we have 3 rotters now, and we're not getting rid of them tomorrow.
Oh, no.
We're gonna-
Look, if something else works better, I'm flexible, I'm evolved.
Yeah.
But the point is I'd love to know more about this. And what is a Harbin system?
Harbin is the brand name. It's basically, think of it as it's what we currently call the jetters.
No, I understand what you're using it for.
Yeah, the Harbin's just a brand name.
And so how long have they been around? Someone
I
in
don't
here
know.
knows. John? They've been around for what,
20,
20 years?
yeah, at least.
Yeah.
And is it positive displacement pumps or multiplex or?
It's a half-inch hose system.
Okay,
So-
so you're using a smaller system to, I understand.
Yeah, 18 to 30 gallons a minute.
Higher pressure.
Same type of reach.
They don't happen to be tractors, do they?
No, it's all hydraulically driven.
Okay, but they move around on the back of a vehicle.
No, it's vehicle mounted.
Vehicle mount.
F550s.
I'm sorry.
We should meet and I can fill you in on
I get
our
to see when you
stories.
get one in stock so I can see what you're up to.
Right, back to you.
So page 11 of 20 just talks about payroll issues. And the employee portion of the payroll contribution, 8% that the district pays the employee portion for employees hired before July 2010. 2016, the law changes, and we may have the option to look at requiring the employees to pick up their 8%. It's got to be a meet and confer issue. I know some agencies are giving some raises and trading off some raises for the employee picking up their shares again. And some agencies are getting ready to see if they can just
Hardball.
play hardball.
They are playing hardball.
Let's see, where am I? Page 15 to 20. 15 to 20 is interesting. It's a capital expenditure summary. And I noticed for item number 6, on the description, we had lateral replacement grant program, 600,000. And at the last meeting, there was a brief little discussion. We were talking about the lateral grant program. And the consultant was here giving us some issues.
Right.
And I guess we'll
That's
talk
what-
about it again tonight.
Yeah, that's actually exactly where this came from. It's the number we developed after we set the targets for the program. So but we can answer more questions about it.
So, what do we have this year, 250,000?
This year, I think we had budgeted 250,000, and so far, we're still, I don't know, I want to say, you guys want to, well, what's the number? We can probably tell you. It's somewhere, it's not 250, we're still lagging substantially.
So then I have a question. How close are we to meeting the regional board's requirements that we put X amount of dollars into lateral?
The supplemental environmental,
Mhm.
we are on target, Frank.
Okay.
They've given us, we have a couple more years to
So we'll
run.
do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna make
Okay, so it seems 600,000 may be a little ambitious. So then I go down to number 7, it says infiltration reduction program,
Correct.
150,000. My sense is more going on than just some bad laterals, for the amount of water that we're picking up. And I don't know if we got creeks flowing into our pipe someplace, or if we have downspouts going into our sewer system.
Yeah.
And it may take, maybe we do some kind of voluntary inspection program where we get permission from the
Yeah.
owners to kind of check the property to see if they've got their downspouts connected to our sewer
That's
system.
what this money is all about.
That's what that's for?
That's what that's all
Okay,
about.
so here's what I'm thinking, I mean, think a little more out loud here. I'm thinking of the item 6, reducing it from 600,000 to 400,000, and taking the 150,000 and increasing it to 250,000.
Okay, to go find the problem more,
So
so.
really go after those problems.
Yeah,
Then I go down to number 9, it says hydraulic model update, 350,000, and I'm not sure what a hydraulic model update is, so.
okay.
um,
Do you want me to explain a little bit about that?
is it-
Yeah, I give you a real, so basically, the hydraulic model update, back in 2006, we referred to what we call the SHECAP, which is, I'll get it wrong, but something like this, Sanitary Sewer Hydraulic Evaluation Capacity Assurance Plan. It's a mouthful. But basically, what the SHECAP required you to do was to, well, this was the expectation, was to create what's called a hydraulics model of your system. An hydraulics model is nothing more than it's a computer model of your system that simulates the actual real-time hydraulics in the pipes. So you put rainfall and sewage flow into it, and it has all of your pipes, and it uses the hydraulic equations to track it through time.
So measure it, is it measured at a certain point?
Exactly. To bring it down to a very pragmatic point, you might say, at this point in my system, during a 1 in 20-year storm, am I going to overflow or not?
Mhm.
When you run the hydraulics model, it will give you an indication of what that part of the system is going to look like. So
And it's
it's
based on invert elevations that are already established.
Right, so very, very,
Okay, so let me take a step further.
yeah.
Can you use that to determine where some of this inflow, infiltration is coming
Well,
from.
that's what Vivian.
I mean, if you got a segment here that's flowing
Yeah.
normally,
Yeah.
even during high rains, it's no problem, and you're
Right.
down here.
Right, no, it's set up to help model
Do
that.
that?
And
Okay.
here's
It's
the
called
nice part
infiltration
about
bases.
that though, Frank, is what we did this year was the precursor to this, which is still, we're gonna get the report either later this month or next. We're finishing up the flow monitoring study. Think of the flow monitoring study as which, remember what it did? It put 20 monitoring stations all around the district, and it monitored flows literally on a minute-by-minute basis for like 4 months. And, we only got a couple big storms, but that's how it panned out. One of them was a big one. That data is basically what you use to calibrate your model. So you don't just go blindly creating a model. The way we know our model works is we're going to put in similar rainfall hydrology to what we saw, and we're going to verify that the system gets replicated appropriately. So all that is saying, step one to this really was the flow monitoring study. It generated the raw input, a lot of the raw input data for the model. This next effort in this fiscal year is going to use that to build the model. And then this, in turn, is going to put us in a position to address a lot of long-term issues. Targeted I&I reduction. I know one of the things you've been concerned about for good reason. How do we handle assessments of significant future impacts, part of the development on the system and what their impacts are. I think the 350,000 is definitely sufficient to take care of a good, solid update to the hydraulics model. Oh yeah, no question. So basically, okay, it's good stuff. I
Sure.
talked too much
Were
about it.
were you going to move that we changed the lateral and the infiltration
Yeah.
around? Because I think Vivian.
It's almost there.
Because I
Can
think
Frank
we ought to be
finish?
data-driven. And rather than move something like that tonight, I'd like to have Vivian tell us whether she
Yeah,
or.
we don't have to adopt the budget.
Okay, good.
That's okay. We can wait till Vivian
Well,
comes.
let me
Let me finish, let me get you down one
Yeah.
more. 11, graywater systems and wastewater reduction. I'm suggesting I go from 200,000 to 300,000. It looks like MMWD will probably run a rebate program for us.
I can give you a quick update on that if you like. It's a bit of a day.
Do you have some information?
Yeah, so what's happening on that is, these pens are terrible.
This one seems to work better.
So I think as the board's aware, we put that in last year's budget with the idea of trying to help spur some
Sure.
innovative gray water and wastewater reduction. Something more than low flow shower heads and all that good stuff. It didn't happen. Between us and MMWD, we weren't really able to jumpstart it. So in the last 2 months or so, we've had on and off discussions. I've talked with Krishna Kumar a few times. And what's just now starting to kind of crystallize, and it's still a concept, so there's more work to be done, is that you'll have a three-way partnership. You'll have the district, you'll have MMWD, and you'll have the North Bay Conservation Corps. And what we'll be doing is, the North Bay Conservation Corps will provide the engine to really drive the grant program and go out and get people to come. And what we'll be doing, this is the concept, is to fund residential and or commercial state-of-the-art gray water systems at the retail level. So people can see that they work, et cetera. So the idea is to have us help provide funding, MMWD provide technical expertise, because their guys are very familiar with some of the details on this, and then have North Bay Conservation Corps really provide, again, sort of the administrative engine and the push to get out there and make the whole thing happen. I think it's an incredible opportunity. We've got a lot more to talk about, but that is what, I'm a little bit ahead of things, that's what I would envision that money's being used for.
Okay, so I'm suggesting you go to 300,000. For instance, I was at the Fairfax Festival on the weekend, and there's a men's restroom. They had 3 urinals. One is broken, they took it out. Now there's 2. They flush. I mean, we could put 3 waterless urinals in there. It's safe. And
Yeah,
save a lot of,
Yeah.
over a year.
right.
A
Well, if you put 300,000 in there, not all, you could say a portion of it goes for these types of uses and say 200, you could split it out.
Sure, absolutely. But, and I'm thinking, if we start converting some of our schools and our public buildings, the urinals,
Yeah.
in our district,
Yeah.
not over, but
Yeah.
in our district, and those should, we could do a bunch. And if we have the North Bay,
Water,
the
water,
cruise,
yeah, the watershed association.
is that, no, the Conservation Corps?
Oh, North Bay Conservation.
They don't want to do some, actually doing some of the physical work?
Yes.
They could go into some.
And here's the nice part about that, they've been doing business with MMWD for years. They
Right.
use them for their watershed programs, and they
Sure.
also use them on their water conservation program. So, North Bay Conservation Corps, it's a really, just a great potential partnership.
Okay, so here, so I'm just suggesting that we move that 600,000 around. We drop that to 4, add 100,000 to the next item, and then add 100,000 to 11.
So you're gonna pull that.
So you got the same amount of money, it's just a little different allocation. And we had 200,000 last year, and we didn't use a dime of it. So.
Only because MWD.
No, I'm just saying,
Whatever
I'm just saying.
But I love
We're
how
flexible,
data-driven, though.
we're flexible enough, I think, that if some one of these isn't going, you can move the money back to the other one. I'm just trying to be able to go to the
You're trying to reach
Regional
within
Water
your
Quality
budget.
Control Board and say, look what they're doing up there in Ross Valley. My gosh, they're putting some money into conservation and wastewater reduction, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I think it's a good program for us.
Well, one thing to remember, so first of all, as you mentioned, the data-driven kind of approach, we did suggest also moving back to about a $4,000 grant funding level for the private laterals.
Mhm.
So at 400,000, that would fund about 100 grant applications, which is okay. It's lower than the activity that we have been doing year in and year out recently, but here's what's changing about the picture. Up until this year, that was our only tool in the I&I reduction effort. All we did was the grant program. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but as we get further into tonight's agenda, to your data-driven request, Peter, I think we're going to see that there's a whole host of new variables that are going to impact the level of activity on I&I reduction this year. So I wouldn't get too focused on whether we do 100 or 150 laterals, because we're going to have point it that way for your presentation, we're going to have a whole batch of activity this year. For what it's worth, I know you guys are the one, you need to discuss this. I would generally think that that's a workable approach to move those numbers around. From what, and this has been kind of a dynamic situation the last month or so. Like I said, the North Bay Conservation Corps thing just came up, but and I would agree, Frank, with your point that, look, keep the totals run with the numbers and recognize that if 6 months into the year, things haven't unfolded the way they are, we can make adjustments.
Adjust them back.
I don't want to get too hung up on whether it's, we think it's going to be 100 laterals or 150 laterals. So,
Well, you will get more people with 4,000.
you will.
You will get a ton more.
Yes, you will.
So,
And when we've run out of money, we'll have an impetus to get this board together and say, hey, guys, all the money's spent, we're only halfway through the year. Do we want to do more for the grant program?
Sure.
And you know what? That's a good problem to have.
I think, yeah, and frankly, if I leave any kind of helpful hint for the board in the future, please keep refunding your lateral grant program, even if the state doesn't require it.
It's a good program.
We've been funding it every year.
I know that. Let's not let it drop off the radar.
But Vivian can give us a cost effectiveness evaluation between the various things we're talking about here. That curve that showed the amount of water that's going to be flowing and how much we're going to have to pay for the water that's making it to CMSA over the next 15, 20 years, that's the driving force that tells you this is cost effective or more cost effective than X is better than Y.
Right, and the thing is they'll always come up with a reason to raise rates down at the treatment plant, even if there isn't even if there's a reduction of it.
What's the raise? So on 18 and 20, head count, 30 employees. So we went from 25 to 38. I guess that's I don't know the board. I voted to it. I voted for most of those. And every once in a while I look back and say to myself, is that a good move, increasing the personnel by that much? And could we have spent some of that money fixing pipe instead of paying all these employees on it. But we're gonna have well, someone's gonna look at our numbers and the operation to see if we're using everybody.
As a fact, that's under the staffing plan, Frank, yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's a big part of the RGS work.
I kind of jumped around just a little bit on you. Now I'm on 86.5.
That-
Something jumped, I don't know what it was, it jumped up. System maintenance, that jumped 26% up to 930,000, under operations, pump stations. Maybe that's pump station work. And then general administration jumped 41%, under operations.
Yeah.
One of them dropped 50%, professional services. So I'm just trying to understand what those specifically, what that was.
Well, yeah, professional services, a big part of it is that we're hoping that we're gonna see a drop in legal.
Okay, okay.
You're looking at the operations, so
Right.
if you look at, you're looking at A6.5, and you
Yeah.
flip the page to A6.6, you'll see the categories that you're
Actual
referring to.
breakdown, yeah.
So the professional services, for instance, was all budgeted outside engineering.
Mhm.
That's been cut in half,
Okay.
because that wasn't going to be used, and because we're projecting about 60,000 this year. So that's why it's cut in half. System maintenance, if you look on A6.6, it's mostly tools, and you'll see it's lines 44 to 60, the system maintenance categories. So you get a kind of further breakdown on that next page.
Okay, excellent.
So since we've got you right where we want you now, as far as your standby overtime, we're up 54%, or that's projected budget for 14-15. You're projecting 50% increase, basically?
It's actually, the projection's at 85,000. The percentage change is from the previous year's budget.
Based off of that? Okay.
So that's why you'll see a big 54% increase. But
Right.
you'll see projected is 85, and our budget is at 90, about 94,
Okay.
95.
And then the 300% in recruitment and retention, that's also based off the prior fiscal year budget, right?
Yes,
Okay. Right.
and that's just to fill the vacant positions. Does that help answer the questions, Frank?
Okay, so, 86.4, community outreach newsletter. I think we budgeted 25,000, we didn't spend anything. Community outreach, public outreach. We budgeted 120, projected to spend 42, draw about 100,000 this year in the budget. You know, it seems that maybe, you know, before we had some pretty slick regular news letters going out, brochures, and everybody said, that's all you guys doing, are gilding the lily, telling us how good you are, and we know things aren't too, something's wrong down there. They didn't know what, we didn't really know what, but anyway. But I'm thinking maybe we need to have a real down-to-earth, honest newsletter that goes out when we talk about things like gutters, downspouts going into the sewer system, fats and grease and oils, maybe setting up something like a collection system with Marin Sanitary, where they put a can out to collect people's grease. Talking about the diapers and the stuff that end up going down and blocking up our toilets. It's not just us, it happens all over the place. And there's billboards up in Sonoma County that talks about the diapers and stuff. So,
Wipes and
you know,
sanitary wipes. And
sanitary, all
cloths.
that. So maybe we need to keep some. I know we got an extra 100,000 for human resources consultant.
Yeah, a couple quick comments on that, Frank. So we got going on a pretty nice steady rhythm on it. What I thought was a newsletter like what you're talking about. It was real down to earth. I mean, what I mean, it was very practical. It wasn't a lot of glossy stuff. It said, here's what's going on at the district, here's important business. It said, here's where we're doing capital projects. It made the do not flush, messages. And we just basically, it was something we were doing with staff only in an effort to kind of keep the cost down.
Sure.
I thought particularly the last 2 or 3 of them looked great. We got great response from the community. Debbie Stutzman was helping us distribute them. And basically, we just ran out of steam to do them. The holidays hit, it's actually what I remember. And but basically somewhere in November, December, things just kind of stalled out. I would like us, I mean, if you guys go back and take a look at those last couple of newsletters, and I'm guessing probably October, November was our last one, let us know if you think they're hitting the right mark. We generally thought we were getting positive feedback. They were very low cost. The problem was we were kind of doing them on the fly. So my suggestion, what I'd like to try to do on sort of a pilot basis is get back to that and see if we can get it back on a regular footing, because it was very inexpensive, but I thought quite effective.
You know what the distribution was on that?
Off the top I don't, but we were using some pretty nice newsletter email management tools that one of the staff came up with. Debbie Stutzman was putting them out with her thing, which goes to like 1,200 people or something. So it was pretty good. The other thing we did, and that's the most of that 42,000, is we actually sat down and we did a coordinated campaign in 3 of the local newspapers, dealing mostly with the lateral outreach program and so forth. But we put stuff in the IJ, the Civic Sun, etc. So we were doing things this year, but it was kind of catch as catch can. Again, I would sort of put it this way: if we set a goal of 100,000 and we actually put it to good use for good basic public outreach, like what you guys are talking about, fog, the flushables issue, the lateral program, good basic stuff. If we can spend that 100,000 through some combination of ads and low-cost newsletters that we produce in-house, I would consider that success. It'd be nice to do more, but that's a good start.
I would even think maybe even have a little questionnaire that they could cut out and fill out and
Tell
send
us
it
what
to
you
us.
think.
Tell us what you think about our operation, about
Yeah.
us. Well, what do you think
Yeah.
about us? I mean,
Yeah.
are we doing a good job? Are we doing a poor job? Can we do better? What do you think we should be doing that we're not doing? Stuff like
Yeah.
that. So just going on down that list a little more. For legal employment matters, we had 100,000 budgeted. We projected 162,000, and we're budgeting this year 12,000.
Yes.
So we have, well, I guess only one legal matter pending. Is that Chimino?
And it's not even ours anymore.
It's
out. It's with our insurance company.
So we don't have to defend it.
They're depending.
Our liabilities are capped at this point. We're done. They have it, and we aren't doing anything further with it. So we have no open, what I would consider.
Oh, that's settled. The case is settled.
Well, no,
No.
not correct. It is not settled. It is
Okay.
still in litigation, but it is between our insurance company lawyers and whatever lawyers he has retained. And so we have no, what I would call open
Okay.
further matters.
Isn't this number lower because we have RGS?
Oh, certainly,
Yeah,
of course,
do we-
yes.
We're not
absolutely.
using outside counsel to do the grievance and
Investigation.
investigations and all of that. We have, so,
So we're trading some dollars.
A little bit, but hugely more efficient dollars. Yeah.
It's preventative too, we're not having to go to.
We try to resolve it at the lowest possible level. Once you get legal involved, it's usually at the highest possible level.
In looking at this one, this is the project.
Yeah, the capital project schedule?
Sure. So the 7831, that was number 4, pipeline rehabilitation projects, a whole bunch of them.
Yep.
So that's the big one on there, right? Is that
Uh,
going to be done this fiscal year?
Which line, Frank?
Line 4, it's line 4.
FY
Project.
14-15.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. That is the work that's to be done this year. That is what we'll be talking about later this evening, is the design contract for that work. And that's the mileage to, well, you guys know.
But you won't get the construction done this coming year.
Actually, we will.
You need $4 million of construction on that.
Yes. We're getting that.
So we're
Well,
going to
the
do
industry's getting that.
Shady Lane, we're doing that one this year?
Can you guys address that? I don't know.
That's
To
number 2.
address the Shady Lane truck sewer item, there, out of the large amortization assessment, there is likelihood from that inspection that some repair work, critical repair work has to be performed in that pipeline. That repair work is what's apportioned here on item number 3, which you pointed out, Director Egger. We are until we get the large damage condition assessment information back.
We're not just gonna replace it yet. We're gonna-
Right.
It's just a repair.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a
Capital
great
repair.
example, Frank, and well, for the whole board. When we were,
Question.
well, just real briefly, one of the things we were stressing about the value of the large damage and condition assessment program was we have these big placeholder numbers out there for projects that we really have very little information on. We did that for good reason, that you have to work with the information you have at hand. And as Randall was just pointing out, that's that $3.5 million, that's just the best number we had from many years ago. When we get done with the large damage condition assessment program, which is also including Shady Lane, we are going to know exactly what's supposed to be done in that line. Now, with any luck, it's something much less than 3.5, but the point is we'll have solid information to act on it. So.
Hey, Randy, the manor easement for line item 4500 rehabilitation project, that's manor in Kentfield, Larkspur, right?
That is Manor in Kentfield.
Okay, so it's not manor over in the Greenbrae area?
Thank you. It's Manor in the Kentfield Greenbrae interface area.
Okay, and then that makes sense. And then the upper Butterfield Woodside, is that the actual easement? The Hamrod easement, the one that we had a category 1 in like this last year.
The Butterfield Meadowcroft project referred to in the line 4 project description refers to the lower Butterfield Meadowcroft region. That is a necessary capacity upgrade project along the lower part of Butterfield nearer the Butterfield.
Oh, I skipped down line 5, I'm sorry.
Oh.
And on line 5, the upper Butterfield Woodside restoration of approximately 6 miles of gravity sewer, that includes the Hamrod easements on Woodside, right? The ones that are known as
Correct. This area encompasses the upper Butterfield region of the Sleepy Hollow portion of Butterfield, plus it includes that westerly side of the San Anselmo / Sleepy Hollow interface area.
So up in the Woodside.
Along Woodside.
Is that what we had,
That's
that
good
big,
news.
that spill that went
Yeah.
on for 2 weeks or something we didn't know about?
Yeah, that's
Kids were walking
Correct. That
through
is
it.
the area.
had our category 1, it was a big one, yeah.
Are we gonna replace that line?
We're gonna rehab it.
Okay.
We will have that out to design, and our consultant will give us a fine answer on what the most cost
So
effective.
that's the one where we were cleaning it every 6 months and
Supposed to.
supposedly then went to a 1 year or 2 year and then that blew up on us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry to.
That's it, no. Where am I now? Oh, I'm still, yeah, yes. Well, there was something about community outreach and education, I can't find it. I had all these pages separated out and highlighted, and I can't find it. But, okay. Insurance, deductibles. Now I'm on A6.2. Number 42, insurance deductibles.
Okay.
Are we raising our deductibility to 150,000?
Do you guys know that off the top?
No, our deductible is not raising, but we know of a number of pending cases that we have not yet paid our deductible on. That will be the maximum of 25,000.
So they're pending costs that are going to hit in the new fiscal year, right?
Oh, okay.
That we already know about. We just
Oh.
haven't had the payments yet.
Insurance has not billed us on Roca Drive yet, right?
Yeah, that's probably a good example.
Oh, the triplex up there.
Yeah, so our limited, as she's pointed out, we're capped, our exposure's capped, but those bills haven't actually hit that.
25 grand.
Okay. Then A6.3, 61, facility security. We budgeted 17,000 and now we're down to 3,000. We only spent 3,800. What kind of security? What is that?
Oh, John's not, Randall, can you speak to that? John Clark's been
Is that security at our main office, main headquarters?
Can you please refresh staff's memory on which
863, utilities, facilities
Okay.
security.
Wendy will speak.
Wendy can speak to it, please, go ahead.
Okay. We have a number of alarm systems, fire alarms, burglar alarms, and we have a CCTV system that records. We have companies that monitor those alarms when they go off and attempt to make calls to staff and or to the authorities.
Is that our headquarter building?
It's our headquarter building. In the 3,000 is for our headquarter building. The 17,000 included Larkspur Landing, which has since been shifted over to be covered by in the operations
We
budget.
categorize the expenses, so you'll see as
Or
security.
that money's gonna show up someplace else?
Not, it's still
Not in its
lower,
entirety.
but it's, yes, it's in the operations side, if you're looking at the admin, but that's, yes.
Mhm.
Do we have closed circuit TV around?
We have, yes.
Yeah, only at the Kerner, primarily, well, no, I'm sorry,
No, we
Kerner
have
building and at
Larkspur Landing.
Landing.
So our trucks and stuff that's parked there?
Yeah, they have,
Some small shit, okay.
Yeah,
And
I
we'll
mean,
be
it doesn't cover the whole area, because that's quite a large area, but we do have cameras in key positions.
Okay, so we're still gonna be spending about 17,000 just to reallocate different locations? The budget, is that?
budgeting about 30.
We budgeted 17, but we only spent 38,
We're budgeting
according to
30.
this.
Well, it's because of the categorization, it went into the operations, so you have to add the two together to get to what we actually, if we're looking at security.
It'll be about 16,
Oh,
between
okay,
16 and
but when you combine them
17,000 total.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's approximately 3,000 change for Kerner and 13,000 for Larkspur Landing.
Okay, I'll take a break.
Oh, and Frank, the reason Larkspur Landing's security is so much more expensive is we have to pay for that temporary fencing that is around there.
So when are we gonna do the temporary fencing?
We have to pay. It's just rented. So we have a monthly charge of about $800 or $900.
Have you seen that fencing?
But
Yeah.
we're gonna buy,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah, we
buying
got, we
one.
got
You know, we agreed to spend money and put a nice railroad fence around that one property. I don't know whatever happened to that, but the owner of the dental building was saying, you guys have an old piece of junk out there for
it's for
fencing."
sale, Frank.
What is, the dental building?
Yeah,
Oh, really?
it's got for sale sign.
I'll be darned, maybe we should buy it.
Maybe we should-
Headquarters.
Exactly.
Within district, that's for sure. Is it big enough?
Oh, it's
Yes.
bigger than Kerner.
Is it bigger than Kerner?
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice view.
How much?
I didn't investigate.
Well, I'll check it out. I'll check it out. What do you think we could sell Kerner for?
It would be nice to
million?
have our.
Yeah, we switch it even, no, probably at 4 now.
Well, heck, gee, oh, that's good
It
information.
would solve a lot of problems. Frank.
Yes, it really would, wouldn't it?
I'm gonna be on the board, Frank.
Came back to the district, oh, Pat missed it all. All right.
What did I
Office,
miss?
dentist office, Pat.
Frank wants to buy our 200.
You already voted on it or not?
Oh, no.
All right, so Frank,
You
you're
can't
taking a
vote.
break
You
and
can't
passing the
vote 'cause
baton
you're
to
off.
Pam?
Yeah.
Okay, Pam, questions, comments?
Oh, no, wait, excuse me, before we go to Pat. On the security, I didn't realize that we're paying a monthly fee for that
Yeah,
thing.
That's all
monitor
rented.
it.
It's all rented, but we just went over the finance committee.
That's good, I haven't.
We're buying a new one, correct? 7,000.
Here's what's happening, yeah, there's a portion of the fence between us and the dentist office, where we had put up that temporary fencing, where they just did a whole bunch of sprucing up of the outside of that building, they did a bunch of new landscaping under the dental office, and the owner came to us and said, first of all, he just wanted to, I think, move our fence, and then we realized that they wanted to do some landscaping, then we realized the fence actually was partly on their property, so it needed to be moved anyway. So what we're putting back is basically just, it's permanent, it's just a basic plain black chain link fence to provide some separation. So it won't be rented anymore, but it doesn't solve the longer term issues we're talking about.
It's only one section.
And the rest of the fence is rented.
Yeah, the rest of the fence is
The
rented.
long-term solution is to get the site cleaned up and, get something nice around the whole thing.
So I've always figured that when Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District was ready to use the site,
Yeah,
that they could pay for us to put some sidewalks and
That was-
permanent new fencing in.
that was the hope.
I wouldn't think chain link fencing is the best,
No, and it's just,
most appropriate fencing. I think that needs to come before the board before we go out and buy a new chain link fence.
It's in the budget.
it's just it's a very small section we're talking about. We're not talking about street.
How many feet are we
Six-
talking?
$6,000 for the cyclone fence.
It-
It's a
I think,
safety
guess,
issue.
Frank, it's like 100 or 150 feet of fence. It's, you can't see, it's
So it
basically,
goes up and it cuts over.
it's tucked, yeah, it's the part that you can only see if you're standing in our property or literally back behind our property. It was just an attempt to get it resolved and say, okay, here's a decent fence for now. Because the long-term solution is like what you're describing, something nice, an aesthetic fence for the whole area.
We actually authorized it, the
We
expense.
did, it was over $100,000, I believe.
Uh-huh.
When Mr. Richards was here,
Oh.
something
To
is
put a
ringing a
ribbon fence
bell.
Ah,
To put up a really nice fence.
okay, I don't know what happened with that.
But we look like, we're slum landlords, is what we look like down there.
It's not.
With that fencing, I think it's outrageous that this agency has a chain link fence with torn, ripped, green vinyl. I mean,
Looks bad,
wow,
yeah.
it's a bad image.
So
It used to
what's
look
the
a lot
plan?
worse.
What's the
Well,
plan?
okay,
Well, we
so
occupied
really,
that
so
part.
what happened last year, not about, I forget, March, April, when it looked like things were taking a promising turn with Golden Gate towards pursuing the parking, we thought, well, what we'll do is we'll use that process to motivate and get done some frontage improvements, including things like fencing. We've worked out some kind of cost share agreement, and that would be the driver for putting in sidewalks, putting in some nice crosswalks, and putting in some decent fencing. That's why nothing's happened, because we were hoping to do it under the parking agreement
Mhm.
process, and that stalled out, so nothing was going on.
That's gonna get.
How did it get stalled?
Well, Golden.
Is it our EPA stuff?
No.
A couple of things stalled it out. The first thing that stalled it out was our EPA stuff, Frank.
Okay.
And the second thing that stalled it out now is, it's hard to say, but people are, well, there just doesn't seem to be as much interest at the moment. I think people are on hold because of all the, I'm pointing that way, the stationary plan.
Yeah.
I don't know what to read into
I thought the
it.
mayor wanted to see that parking lot.
They were in support of it towards that, yeah.
Well, we haven't really sat down at the table to really iron out
Correct.
the good, the bad, and the ugly of
Yeah.
it.
But there are monies, actually, before I forget, there are monies, and if you guys can help me point to them, we have monies in there for some generic upgrades to the site. And
This
it's
would be,
like,
this is the Larkspur.
The Larkspur
Development
Landing site.
Plan.
It's on Schedule A9,
thank you.
line 10. It's $250,000
Okay.
LLC property activity.
Thanks. So we have $250,000 in there, should the opportunity arise to at least get started on something with improving the appearance of the site. And I couldn't agree with you more, Frank. I say this to people all the time. The site looks terrible.
Okay.
It needs to be
Okay,
different.
okay, let Pam.
All right, so,
Crack at it.
So Greg, it's great you're talking about doing this regional sharing of staff. I think that's going to be really something that we need to stay on board with. So that, are you there?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
I'm listening.
And because, it's all new to me, and I'd like to start looking at examples and see how that can really help us decrease some budget items.
Okay.
The work study thing's gonna start, and you said it's gonna take some time, but I also noticed in HR that they are actually looking at some of how staffing is done.
Yes.
So, I don't know what they're doing, but that's another
Well, that's
agenda
the
item. The other thing that I wanna know, and it's really not in the budget, we need to look at the whole facility on a cost-effective issue for energy. And I know I talked
Yes.
about the solar, but
Yeah.
I'm talking everywhere. I'm talking leaving the lights on, I'm talking about everything, gas, whatever ways, as a public agency, we really need to step up to be as cost effective as we can. From the energy footprint, climate change,
That is becoming a standard.
and I don't know that here. I have never
Okay.
seen any education or anything.
We don't really have it yet, yeah.
Okay,
is
so
why.
I'll bug you about it.
Okay, but in all seriousness, it is becoming a standard performance metric for water and wastewater utilities, there's no question. You may have seen just recently, CMSA has formed a dedicated, I think it's roughly something like greenhouse gas and carbon footprint committee.
You're direct for me.
There you go, okay. That's the kind of stuff that's becoming more of the norm in the industry, and we just haven't got there yet.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
still pretty new, but it's where we're all headed.
I think what Pam, I don't like to speak on behalf of him, but I'd like to read a little bit into this. So some of the simple alternatives that I think are right off the bat are pretty accessible changes from 40 and 30 and 65 watt bulbs to now the more innovative solution of a 5 watt 10-year lifespan bulb. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to save not only money on energy, but also use less of it.
Well,
Just simple stuff.
there are agencies now that will, if you're a senior citizen, go out to your house and actually go through your house. My mother told me this. The lights, fixture, everything changes at no cost to her. So, I don't know, I'm just seeing it everywhere.
So quick comment, John's not here. We found out just recently, he's in touch, just very early exploratory discussions with 3 different local solar companies to start giving them information on our building sizes and so forth. And then what I did, same topic, is there's an outfit called SPG Solar. They're up in Nevada. They've been around, well, that industry's so new, I forget how long they've been around. But SPG was the design and construction. They did design and construction delivery for the 1 megawatt project that I was involved in my former general manager position. So I reached out to the project manager from that project, because he turns out he's still in Nevada, and we're going to get together and just start talking, looking at our facilities.
Yeah,
and concepts.
yeah.
So that's kind of what's going on, and actually what I would throw this out to the board, relative to your comment, Jan, that it has nothing to do with budget, but I'll throw it out anyway. When we get to strategic planning, and we talk about greenhouse gas and carbon footprint and all that wonderful stuff we want to talk about these days, you're going to have much greater, I would say, success and constructive progress on that if you do it on what I refer to as a CMSA-wide basis. Meaning you take the entire service area served by CMSA as a JPA, and you count for treatment, pump stations, vehicles, etc.
So we could have a summit.
It's really how you should do it.
No, I agree.
So in other words, the whole JPA apply the principles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they've already jump-started it as usual, they're a little bit ahead.
Okay,
But
great.
there's also value in the strength in numbers and pricing and everything else. So
Yeah.
Okay, so the other, I don't have too much to add. Legal is down to 235,000 for the year. Is that the budget?
General is 180.
For the year.
It's about,
276.
Okay,
yeah.
and that's based on projections.
Yes.
Isn't that kind of high?
276?
Yeah.
Well, if you
I mean,
consider.
we're going
we've
like
been-
at 20, I know we haven't got to a couple of these things,
Yeah.
but it just seems really high to have illegal that high. What other board
What is, we have a minimum of 15,000, what's 15 times 12?
180,000.
Okay, and we're probably gonna have a CMSA trial?
That
So-
trial could be in one day, but
Well, or it
No,
could
we
be
cannot.
2 weeks.
There's,
a couple of days.
And there's
Anyway,
there's
no,
traffic
it's
and
gonna be
depositions
weeks.
and
There's no way that's gonna be one day or.
Well, I don't want to fight that. So,
you start.
different people say different things. So, but, okay, so we'll just leave it at that. I was kind of surprised since we dropped so dramatically.
Well, if you look at it on a trend basis, it is a huge decrease. Yeah.
Okay.
It is still
All
a
right.
huge decrease.
We're projecting 480,000 for this year.
I do want to add though, with the union contract, there could be some budget changing.
Yeah.
quite a bit.
This year?
Well, it probably will happen next
Wouldn't
year.
hurt.
Oh, it's next
We'd
year,
be
it's when it's up.
negotiating in 15.
Oh, that's right, sorry, I thought it was starting this year.
We're good for one.
And then last, I would really like to see an engineer intern here, or a student intern,
Okay.
that we could give projects to, I mean, some of this climate change or whatever, because I know there's some areas of the staff that are just a newsletter maybe, but a lot of agencies, a lot of municipalities have interns.
We have. We just hire a new engineering
We're doing it.
No, I mean a student, I mean
yeah.
a student.
Yeah.
He's talking about just the
Student
intern.
engineer.
Or summer work, summer help.
Yeah,
Well,
I think it'd be great.
We did that, I've had a couple of different experiences with that, and they've generally been pretty positive.
Yeah.
You get a good, person with 1 or 2 years in the right type of program, and they have enough skills to be really valuable, and they're more than happy to work for a pay rate that for us is like, woo-hoo, that's bargain. So you get a lot of value with the certain steps.
We hired a student intern when we were in Fairfax.
Mhm.
Drive
You ready?
a park truck, and he ran into a Mercedes. It cost us about $300,000.
That's a bummer story. But we just had another intern that wrote a grant for us. He wrote a grant for us, so, yeah. Okay, I'm done. I want to go to the bathroom.
Not your turn.
Shall we, could we take a 5-minute
Well,
bio
sure.
break, as we
Let's
call
do
it? Thank you, and then we'll come back to this item. The remaining is over.
There's no comment?
I will bring it back to the board.
And you're looking for a motion?
I would so move to approve resolution number 1478. Resolution of the Board of Directors of the Sanitary District Number 1 adopting the budget for fiscal year 2014-2015. In the amounts of operation and maintenance, $14,465,937, and capital, including a debt service. So that means paying off the previous bond, and that's part of debt service?
The ongoing debt service.
All the debt service, whatever it is.
You were not paying off any bond.
The 17, yeah, we're paying off the 17.9 million in bond?
No, that's already done.
I have the same question.
Yeah. Okay, so what we're still,
Oh, go ahead.
Capital.
we have annual payments being made on that last bond issuance, and they're reflected in the discontinued.
But you don't pay it off, it's paid.
Right,
No.
working towards paying it down.
Thanks.
So the capital was 21,944,453 for a total of 36,410,390, and that would include a minor adjustment on page 15 and 20 on the capital expenditure summary. Item 6, the lateral grant would go from 600 to 400,000. Infiltration reduction program would go from 150 to 250. And 11, gray water systems wastewater reduction would go from 200 to 300.
Okay, well, I guess I'm confused. So, my only concern is the lateral grant, because we're gonna run out.
But you have to have a second, and then you have to have discussion of the motion.
So who's going to second?
You know it's not good.
Well, before this is a question.
You can do a point of information first.
Thank you. We're gonna run out of the lateral money, so where's that money? Oh, we will.
If we do,
I
Pam,
met with the realtors.
if we do.
They're waiting
then
for us tonight to go for
Yeah.
4,000.
If that happened, and it happened in the first 6 months of the fiscal year, then we would look at that entire basket of funds that are related to that type of activity and say, okay, what do we want to do? It's a good problem to have, is how I look.
Frank, why don't you do it that way then?
Why don't we
Fix the basket at the 22.4 million or whatever it is,
just add?
with the understanding the board's going to look at it on a regular basis and adjust it one way or the other.
Part of any
That gives you a
budget.
lot of flexibility.
Part of any budget.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
I understand. So I would just change these numbers.
Yeah, to the ones you just
So
cited.
so the total, 2,426,455 remains the same.
Yeah.
Can I just do it the other way? I just say there's the totals there and the board will divide it up as.
No.
Because the 600,000 makes the more sense to me. See?
What?
The 600,000 makes more sense to me than 4, and I hate to vote against the
You
budget.
believe it's the little local laterals.
All
I
right.
absolutely do.
Wait a minute,
Oh,
time out.
And Vivian showed us
Wait a
that.
minute, can we just add $200,000?
To the budget, then we have to go back and do the whole thing.
Why can't we just amend the resolution for another $200,000? And that way the laterals will stay the same. Julie?
You don't,
You can do anything you want.
Yeah. I think that what I would emphasize to the board is, and we're going to get into this in a couple, two more items, is you're going to see such a extensive new range of activities related to I&I that just, we are going to learn a lot this year, and I would not expect the numbers to fall out exactly as we plan, no matter what.
Okay.
So my recommendation, I don't mean this, is to
We can break it out differently. We can leave the 6 for lateral and go down to number 12, studies, reviews, software, miscellaneous. That's 401,455. Drop that to 201,000.
That has a lot of support actually for that number. It's not just an arbitrary 400,000. There's actually supporting studies that go behind that 400,000. So you can't just arbitrarily cut it in half.
But the other numbers are
Well,
okay.
sure you can, you said
Greg?
Well, recognize that if you go with what Frank's suggesting, we're still looking
Yeah, but it's not
at
realizable.
somewhere in the neighborhood of a $400,000 net increase in funds dedicated to that batch of activities over the last couple of years. And I would suggest that no matter how you slice it, if we end up putting those funds to use and we actually expend them, we're going to be way, way ahead of the game. I strongly.
Okay, I just want to make sure if we run out of lateral and grant money, we're going to be able to put more in the pot for the ratepayers.
It'd be great if we could spend 400,000 in 6 months on lateral grants. It's not going to happen.
But you guys,
But if it does, we can. It's not adjusted.
like I asked earlier, just keep refunding your lateral grant program, and you guys will make those motions in the future.
Well, when I met with the realtors, which is about 30 of them, they
I wouldn't
told-
worry about them too much.
I know, but what they told me is that a lot of their people didn't even want to get 2,500 because their lateral assessments were so high.
You know what, you're full of it, Pam. I've been working with them for 7 years, and they do exactly what they're told in the city of South City because they care about selling property.
Yeah, but did you see what Vivian's numbers showed? At 2,500, we hardly did any. At 4,000, we were.
Sure, of course, the incentive is really on the property
Yeah.
owner, even without a point.
Okay.
so we have a motion, and I mean, my point of information would be, as staff, does this concern staff, or is it?
I would, my professional recommendation is to go with the adjustments I've been suggesting, for the reasons I've noted. When you look at the entire basket of activity that we're undertaking and how much of a change it represents, this is going to be a learning year, but no matter how you slice it, we are going to generate way more activity on lateral replacements than we have ever seen before if we're even halfway successful here.
Okay. So the motion on the table is to approve the resolution with the amendment that on page 15 of 20, we're revising line 6 to be 400,000, line 7 to be 250, and line 11 to be 300.
And the total
That
remains the same.
Total remains.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have Egger and Wasco.
Do a
Do
roll.
we have to do a roll call?
Yeah, it is a roll call to resolution.
Okay. Director May, Sandu? Aye. Sullivan?
Aye.
Wasco?
I.
Hager?
Aye.
And Philip?
Aye. Thank you. Let's vote on budget. Item number 10, consideration of approving a professional services agreement for engineering design of fiscal year 14-15 pipeline rehab project with Harris and Associates, not to exceed $538,681, and for GM to execute the agreement.
Your patience is the most.
Right.
I'll introduce.
You learn a lot every time.
We're multitasking here anyway.
Okay, so this is really the first year that we're going to be undertaking our gravity sewer capital rehab program in the full way it's been intended to since we started the IFP. So what I mean by that is we're working from full condition assessment information. We're working from fully, we're utilizing the risk model to help identify the priority areas. And we are consolidating the work into efficient areas that are the highest risk areas for the district. And we are utilizing a range of construction methods, not any one, based on consistent criteria. So rather than do this in piecemeal, we are doing a single design contract that will put together the bid package, construction documents, I should say, for a little over 5 miles total of gravity sewer rehab. Now I say 5 miles, about 4 of that is actual, what I call rehab or replacement. That's open cut, CIPP, pipe bursting. And then the additional mileage is credit that we'll be getting in a sense for some targeted spot repairs that are going on in the same area. And the figures you have in your report show you where that is. So this is a pretty standard design contract. We're utilizing all the standard terms and conditions. We did go through an RFP process. We received 6 proposals. We had an initial review that took it down to 3. Then we did a review of those 3 with myself, the district engineer, and we also utilized the services of Dave Bernardi, who's a retired but still active senior public works person in the community who does a lot of this kind of work. The final selection process resulted in a unanimous recommendation to go with Harrison Associates out of the top 3. As it turned out, when we opened up the price envelopes, which we did separate, first we ranked on qualifications, then we looked at price. Harris turned out to be about in the middle. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, depending. The other 2, Corollo was about 30% higher, and the other one was just unrealistically low. This was West Yost, but we don't think they had a sound basis for the estimate. So the cost of engineering services for this is at $538,681. It represents about 12% of construction cost, which is a good check on the reasonableness of the design fee. Some of the other reasons, basically, that went behind staff's recommendations is that Harris is the team that has just finished under some pretty stressful conditions and very tight timelines, completing the Group A and Group B projects. So they've demonstrated a pretty high level of service on the design end of things. I do want to be clear, this contract, unlike some prior ones, it is for engineering services only. We're not bundling construction management and SDC. Now those will come back to you later under separate consideration. And this is on purpose. We're sort of still trying to figure out the best approach to our project delivery. But basically that's what you have in front of you. The design work itself will go quite quickly. Again, it's a fairly targeted geographic area on purpose. And the work would essentially, let me refer you back to the schedule. You're looking at design being done by essentially the end of this calendar year, December, and we'd be in construction awarding, somewhere around the holidays, right after the holidays. And then the goal is at that point to get the work done as quick as possible in the new calendar year. But what you're approving tonight, what you're considering this evening, is the design services contract only. And with that all stopped, and we've got Vern Phillips, and we've got Randall, we've got Jasmine Coffey, who pretty much led the design team for Group A and Group B. I'll hand it back to you.
Board members, questions? Who were the other three besides these three? You said six, right?
Yeah, we had,
As stated, that for the other three with Leasing Associates, New Engineering, and the firm that is called Richardson.
When you do this proposer score sheet, what criteria do you use? These is pretty generic on this. You must have like a checklist.
we do, it's,
A
we have
very,
yeah, we have a standard rating sheet that the first group uses to, when they go through the reading. And it looks at everything like basically team experience, project experience, demonstrated understanding of the project challenges and needs. There is a standard form, Pam. It's more extensive than the one that you have in front of you. I think it has like 6 or 8 major areas that each get a numeric scoring, and then we look at the totals from that.
yeah, because I received this today in the mail.
Right. Okay.
And I have this tonight. So, I don't, is there like, like a put together portfolio that you have from the agency that you've selected?
We've had 6 proposals. Everyone gives us a form, just like what they did. What they've done is just a standard proposal. We received similar proposals from the other 5 submitters. Randall has copies of all of those with him this evening. So it's a pretty standard process. They put those proposals together ideally for our direction, because we let them know what it is we're interested in hearing about. And so they follow a pretty standard formula, which makes them efficient to review ideally. Because we ask them for, project team, resumes, project history, schedule, budget. Yeah, it's meant to be it's just a very apples to apples, very uniform comparison.
And the other 3 came in a lot lower that aren't, is that right?
Correct, correct. And we did it this time a little bit closer to how it's, is my experience, you typically like to do it. We had people submit the proposals and then their costs in 2 separate, we didn't open up the cost information. And this is how you intend to do it. It's called qualifications-based selection. First thing you do is rank them based on their qualifications and background. Then after you've ranked the top ones, then you open up cost information and look at that. It's a little different than what we've done in the past. I think it's an improvement on our process, and that's how we did it this time. So.
Can I see the 3 that you've selected?
Their
portfolios.
That made the final cut.
Their portfolios on what they
I
present.
have
Yeah.
You have? Anybody?
When you say the 3, Pam, you mean the highest?
The 3 you selected.
Okay, yeah, that's going to be Corollo, West Yost.
Yeah, I'd like to see them.
Certainly.
I'm done for now.
Plus, are you done for now?
Yeah.
So it seems cost is no longer a factor for us when we're looking at
I
consultants and contracts.
I wouldn't, it's a factor. It needs to be.
I see nothing about, I have no idea who did what for what.
Yeah, well,
So the 6 that applied, did they all have cost figures in there? I went through them, but I
Yes.
couldn't find the cost figures.
They
They've been
gave,
taken out of that?
no, they give them to us in a separate sealed envelopes that we open up.
Oh, okay.
And Randall can give you a summary of the cost. They range quite widely, which is,
I'm just kind of befuddled by it.
Yeah.
You never get the numbers. It's always, I wonder,
well, in most, okay.
are we blackballing a new engineering? Is this district blackball?
No. Corolla Engineering, just
Can
an
we?
example.
Are we? I asked, are we? I didn't ask him. I said, are we?
No. The
Oh,
short
I
answer
thought
is no.
you said can we?
We have gotten very highly qualified submittals from firms that do this work all around the country. They were not selected. I mean, there is no, so the short answer to your question is no. And I know that there's some history between the district and Newt,
Yes.
but I can tell you that that's not a factor. We are not, no one is being treated any differently in this process. I would just give you an example. I mean, Carollo Engineers is a firm that can hold their own on underground construction against anyone on the West Coast. They have submitted now on 2 of our projects. Now, they haven't been successful in each one. Brown Caldwell, same type of company, they have been. It is not a, oh, well, I don't know how to describe
Okay,
it.
so, but we never get to see numbers. So I mean, you know, I can't vote, I can't vote.
Well, typically, what we're doing in a qualifications-based selection process is you're trying to first get people based on the best team to do the work. And then you are arriving at a reasonable cost for the project. This is not low bid work. This is not construction. This is not buying materials. This is selection of professional services. If you were hiring an architect to design a new building at your winery, you most likely would not say, gosh, if someone can do it for $5,000 and the other guy does it for $500,000, I'm automatically going to go with the guy for $5,000 because he might give you something.
I take a pretty good look at it.
Well, you might take a pretty look at it. Cost is one factor. It's one factor. Yeah, that's all. I mean, I don't want to.
So three were thrown out for.
Not being the highest qualified. We wanted the best qualified firms initially to be in the running.
That's how we ended up with that Mercedes truck a few years ago.
A little bit different, but no.
Okay.
And if I understand correctly, this is a new process by which the cost is.
It's a slight modification for the district. It's a long standard
Right,
process
that's
in the industry.
Right. I might just add, just for some background, there is it's called the Brooks Act, and it's actually legislation that requires public agencies to select on the best qualifications and not have costs involved. Now, cost is always important, and that can be negotiated actually after you've selected the most qualified. But it is a legislation called the Brooks Act, and California's adopted the Mini Brooks Act, which is very similar, but it's QBS process, qualification-based selection, where you do.
So let me explain my position. The people of the Ross Valley elected me to look out for their rate for their tax dollars. That's one of the things I do here. You know, and sometimes I go off on a tangent because I'm representing them. I'm looking out for their pocketbook. So, you know, you have to understand what I'm about.
I understand.
And that's why I'm here.
But
when you get elected and you sit up here, you can tell whoever applies how it's going to be.
completely agree with you. The fact is, though, a lot of times the consultant that has the best qualifications.
I'm allowing it because he's basically filling in information that we would look to the staff for, and he's explaining a legal point of view that I imagine.
Let me ask more.
And you also have the right to do that because you're the president.
Yeah. More.
Let's continue.
There's going to be some new field of law coming down here as the litigation start occurring over errors and omissions and malpractice from engineering firms and construction firms that are not taking into consideration sea level rise. And the Bay Area may be one of the key areas, areas in the country where this is going to occur. And I'm really concerned about the amount of errors and omissions and malpractice liability insurance that they're carrying. If we're going to be putting pipe in the ground, it needs to last an awful long time. And there's been about, they're going to guarantee it for 1 year. That's totally unacceptable to me. The roof of my house, the contractor guarantees it for 10 years, 15, 25 years. We know we're in a vulnerable area here. And so I'm just, I don't have enough information to go tonight on turning this over to.
Well, these are these are, the sea level rise issue is, as you guys know, I mean, it's still, it's obviously a very important issue, but it's not one that has gotten yet to a point where it can always be translated into like, I don't know, specific dollars and so forth. When we talked about the magnolia trunk line, for example, the concern about sea level rise came up, and it was pointed out that we were confident based on the elevation of the construction site that it wasn't even going to be subject to it. Now, I don't want to say that that's the case for these areas. These are sewer pipes. By getting them rehabbed, the one thing we can say is that sea level rise exacerbates inflow and infiltration in any place where pipes are influenced by it. So by rehabbing any pipes, improving pipes in our system that are subject to sea level rise, we are, I mean, it's very simple. We're actually improving our resiliency against sea level rise. So it's actually not too complicated from our perspective. So I think what I'm saying, Frank, is that if you look at the district program of pipeline replacement, regardless of whether you're talking about the 25 or the 2050 projection of 16 inches or the whatever it is, the 100-year projection of 40 to 50 inches, any pipe we're putting in the ground today that's rehabbed and in better shape and is more resistant to seepage, it can only be better than not doing anything. I don't know.
I don't know if how many read the Chronicle editorial. Cities preferably sued. Talk about climate change. While Congress is still mired in climate change denial, insurance companies have no doubt about climate change. For them, the only question is who pays for its effect. The answer to that question is increasingly obvious through all of them.
So upgrading the system is not such a good idea, or you want to relocate everything to higher ground?
It may have to be relocated. I mean, I think we need to be looking at these issues.
Well, there's certain things we can't control in terms of, for example,
We control what pipe we put in the ground, right?
Right. We can put the best quality pipe in the ground. We can focus on areas that we know are already subject to high brackish groundwater, which we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm sort of saying.
Can we ask for a 50-year warranty on the project?
You can ask for, the industry is going to give you what it's used to giving for
1 year.
performance. No, 1 year for, could you, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to defer to.
Sure. The 1 year is the standard public contracting code requirement for warranty period on public works projects. You can require extended warranties on whatever you might want to. I know our manhole rehab, we typically will require at least a 10-year warranty, because we want those to last longer. And so depending on what you want to pay for, now contractor's going to put in his bid, the require, whatever the costs are to carry insurance or a bond or something to cover that. But you can ask for extended warranties on whatever, on our pump station projects, pumps and other important facilities, mechanical equipment, we might have an extended warranty on those as well. But 1 year is the universal public contracting code minimum requirement for contractors to stand behind their construction.
Yes.
Okay. Greg, I appreciate you spending the time with us on this. I'm pretty used to dealing with RFPs in my day job, but from contractors in this arena. So I heard some names mentioned of various firms who were brought into Luke, Corolla Engineering, Union Engineering, Harrison Associates, et al. Every one of the firms that you've mentioned, I have always had a bone to pick over something they've done wrong. So when Corolla was involved, I was furious as a board member when they didn't do their own dipping of the inverts in the pipe on the Heather Garden discharge line from our Heather Garden pump station. It was egregious. It delayed the project and created cost overruns, and it's totally unacceptable. I can't stand it when engineering firms take the given data, elevations and so forth, and take that as gospel. when everyone knows that when the era in which those elevations were shot, in many cases, there was some guesswork or there's deviation from those standard statistics. And for a district to have to pay for that kind of incompetence, and you pay for it in time lost, which is money to me, and also project delays. So I don't care what firm it is, Harris and Associates or whatever. I've seen it from Harris before. I've not been happy with some of the work Harris has done, not necessarily here. Okay? It's all about who's managing managers. All right? So I don't necessarily go along with everything project managers say because they're not always right. The general contractors, if they know the project managers are weak, they're going to be all over you all. And I think you all know that. So now I'm not going to have to be on the board when I'm driving around looking at projects. I'll be one of these bitter citizens that gets irritated if I see cost overruns because of gross incompetence at the highest levels. The guys in the field will do what they're told. If they're strong project managers that don't put up with any crud from the contractors because they won't follow the project outlined in the RFP or the design process. And they will pull stuff. Back up your people in the field. They know what they're talking about. That's all I have to say.
What was Carrillo's numbers?
Their cost proposal was $712,000.
I'm going to 712,000?
And what was West Joe's?
West Joe's was $376,000.
West Joseph's done work for us before.
They're currently they're completing the flow monitoring study for us at the moment, and they have done work in the past, yes.
Yeah, but they're weak.
Yeah.
Big time.
Per week?
It's true.
$150,000?
Right.
Do we know what the other three bid that were just disqualified?
Belici was at $644,000. Blair Church and Flynn was at $447,000. And Newt Engineering was at about $689,000.
Okay.
So as you can see, there's a huge, there's almost there's at least a twofold.
Is there a reason the board doesn't get that information?
Well,
I almost feel like, the mushroom theory is being used on this.
No, that's certainly not the intent, Frank. The standard process in my 20 years of doing this is...
It's not to give the board the dollar amounts, just...
Let me finish if I can.
Go ahead, please.
Is that you complete the RFP process,
Mhm.
you get proposals, and you get sealed envelopes with costs. You review the proposals, and you select, depending on your preference, anywhere from 1 to 3 of the top ranking firms. Then you open the cost proposals, and you say, we really liked you in terms of your qualifications, now let's talk about what you're charging for the work. And you use a whole series of basic rules of thumb and adjustments to determine whether or not the price they're charging is reasonable. You look at their work breakdown structure, you look at the percentage of construction, you look at the amount they put the project management versus design, versus preliminary design, versus pot pulling, versus surveying, versus right-of-way. And you use your professional judgment, because we're all engineers, and we say, do these numbers look right? And then
What do we need a board for?
Frank, it's the
No, tell me. You don't give me the numbers, and you want me to vote on something?
We have the staff.
You wanna
provide us with
reinvent
the best
process.
No.
Yes, I'm not
No,
gonna let you-
So
one
Frank,
ratepayers.
Frank, when you go through all this stuff and try to whittle down the numbers or whatever, hopefully you're not actually thinking that you're the person who's going to qualify who we select.
How many projects have
I've
you
never
guys
been with an
reviewed?
agency who refuses to give their board the dollars and cents in projects that run from $376,000 to
Frank, I
$712,000.
didn't hear Greg say he
Right
refused
there
to
in
give
front of
the
you.
numbers.
That's the standard practice.
It couldn't be in the packet, could it? I don't need the numbers.
Your call.
I need an honest appraisal of what's going on here. I need to know the numbers. I need to see
You're
the
saying
numbers.
that.
If you don't think I don't need to see the numbers, then I don't need to be voting on your
If you'd like
project.
to see the numbers, we will provide you the numbers in the future.
I've asked for them in the past. Nothing's new here. Nothing's
Okay.
changed.
There
No
you
wonder
have
the people of Ross Valley don't have confidence in this agency.
I don't think that's fair characterization. So in the
Nothing
future,
for her to
Greg,
say.
I would say, why don't you give us the numbers And if we are not going with the lowest bidder, explain the staff's rationale for that.
I would suggest,
recommendation,
yeah.
Which is what I was going to say before this whole exchange took
Okay,
place. It's
sure.
a perfectly reasonable request, and if made in a reasonable manner, I think would be received
Yes.
in a reasonable way by our general
Yes.
manager. All right,
Wait.
I would like,
Wait.
yes.
So, do you ever have, like, you know, when you go through this process, do you, you know, like, when we go through an RFP for attorneys or whatever, we invite them to come and present. I'm just curious why, like, before you select, like, the three of them, I don't know, it's just kind of weird. I guess it takes the power out of the board selecting the last one. Do you know what I'm saying? I know you're
Sure.
going on a
Sure.
checklist and expertise and all that, but sometimes it helps to meet these people,
Sure.
meet them, see what they give them 5 minutes to
Sure.
speak. We're giving over $500,000. Does
Sure.
that
Which
sound
is usually why we
awful?
bring
I mean,
the
have you ever
team.
seen that done?
But we're gonna do
But let me
$23
finish.
million.
Let me
And
finish.
you're
Let me
gonna
finish.
spend
Here-
$23
Greg, go
million
ahead and
worth
Here's
of
what I've
time
seen done.
evaluating
Yeah.
projects?
Typically what's done is a selection committee is appointed.
Okay.
And if that selection committee, which can be council members, it can be heads of public works departments, it can be, it all depends by the organization. They often will say, we would like to do interviews, we would like to see you
Okay.
in person.
So that's
They'll
a
conduct
horse
an
with a
interview.
different color. Okay. That
By the
might-
time the decision gets to the elected board, in my experience, it is typically the case that those interviews, the pre-screening, the review of the financials, the review of the qualifications has been done by staff because that is largely what they've been tasked with. We bring the recommendation, we try to provide sound backing for it and answer questions, and that's typically how the process works. In my experience, having design teams on a proposal of this nature come, every single one of them, and give presentations to the board, sort of says you are, well, I would just say at a minimum, it's certainly not the best practices that are followed in
Okay,
the
I just checking it out, that's
Okay.
all. But I'm wondering, with what you're saying is having this little advisory committee,
Sure.
that is part of the board process, that would alleviate some of being sort of like, I get the
Give me
feeling we're
a
getting left
sense
out.
of what you guys would be looking for.
Maybe one board member,
If-
maybe one staff member, maybe one citizen.
Okay.
But I-
Wouldn't it be more productive to have a peer review by professionals or
The peer
who know,
review, just, I guess,
who know what they're doing?
like, I feel
We know what
really.
we're doing.
Let
I
me
don't think
finish,
you do,
let me
no.
finish, you
I think
guys.
you're good at scrutinizing numbers,
Would you
Frank.
just stop, let me finish? I feel inept voting tonight because I don't feel like I understand the process a whole lot, where I trust the numbers, but I just, do you know what I'm saying? Because of the, the debate here, I just don't feel comfortable with voting yet. And that's why I'm asking all these questions, and maybe we need to create a different process. And I have heard in the past.
You're suggesting recreating, I don't know how else to put this. You're suggesting recreating a very fundamental, well-established, well-vetted, universally used process for developing and awarding these projects. If that's the direction the board wants to go, you're happy to go that direction. I'm not going to argue with that. All right? This is the process. I don't know
Maybe
why
you
you
should
don't
sit in on
like
some
it, but it
RFP
is.
processes.
I would have happily, if I didn't think we were allowed or
And
part
then
of
it
it.
become politically awarded, and that would be something that.
Yeah, my
I'm worried
sense
about.
is this is a highly specialized
Oh, yeah, I can see it right on the wall.
professional services agreement, and that if we don't have confidence in the recommendations of our staff, then that's a problem with our confidence in our staff. It's not a problem with the process, so.
Well,
I feel,
Can I
I,
make those recommendations?
yes.
I understand it's very important that the board have confidence in the process and that the public's resources are being allocated, based on sound decision-making and good checks and balances, there's no question. So I think, Frank, those concerns are shared by everybody. We are challenged with balancing that with with working within widely accepted and standard processes And if it would assist the board in terms of your level of confidence by having a select group of 3 or 4 independent professionals from the Marin Public Works community take a look at how the district develops and awards its capital projects and report back to you with recommendations, we'd be happy to do that. Because we have this conversation over and over and over again. And honestly, it's a big waste of time. I'd rather see you guys get what you need to have the confidence you need so we can take care of business efficiently. Because when you ask the question whether we're going to get through the capital works program that we've been targeting each year, I can tell you one thing. If this is how every single project goes, the answer is going to be no. So let's go get 4 or 5 highly respected professionals and let's have them give you their independent assessment of our process so that we do not have to continually defend what we are doing every night. That's my recommendation.
You've read the letter.
Yeah, I knew you were listening to those guys.
I didn't get the letter.
No.
I don't know about
It was
that.
delivered to my
We
house
approached all of
Well,
us.
they-
FedEx. I don't know.
I must be
And I got
hard
the
to
postcard,
find,
okay,
right?
but they know they don't need to talk to me because I have
Didn't come to
problems with the way
me.
they do things.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get.
All right,
So,
This is a technical question.
They have this place in their pocket for you.
So this is for the applicant or whoever. How, and because there's a project just done in Larkspur, the Rose Garden. Are we really going to address some of the planning on sea level rise? Because it's a big deal. Going to the North Bay Watershed Association, I mean, that's all it is right now.
Right.
And they're actually starting to plan projects around sea level rise. So I'm just curious.
Are we going to be taking into account sea level rise?
Well, I mean,
Yes.
how are we going to be doing all these projects? Will that be taken into account in some way?
Let me put it this way.
No, I don't want all the pipes to
Okay,
change.
the predictable,
I mean,
the
move.
current projections of sea level rise,
It's 50 years.
where we have them available and they have a material impact on the job we are designing or being proposed to be constructed, they will be taken into account.
Okay.
Are we using the maps that
Yes, we
BCDC
would
puts
use the
out?
BCDC maps, we've used,
Okay.
there's a currently a 2050 projection and there's a 2100 projection. I'm sure you're familiar with them. They're pretty
Okay.
scary. It's up to 4 feet.
Okay, that's all I needed to know, because
Yeah.
I didn't know what.
If we put impermeable sealed pipe in the ground under the current water level, how does an increase in 2 or 3 feet of sea level
Load pressure.
change that? Well, it doesn't, if it's
If your
impermeable.
manholes, and your-
ambient.
if your manholes and your pipes are hydraulically sealed, it will not matter.
So
And
it's
if
the
it's rated
it's
for
the
the-
laterals that are going to be a problem, and we just cut the lateral repair budget.
I hope I'm clear with you guys. I consider sea level rise from a technical and engineering perspective to be a huge deal. It will impact our infrastructure. If I've implied otherwise, it certainly wasn't my intent. We will work with the best information we have available, and if you've seen the inundation maps I've seen, and you're taking a 50-year time horizon, guess what, folks? It's a big deal.
It is a
for
big
Marin
deal.
County.
We deal with it in Sausalito on a regular discussion. The bottom line is, we still need to replace our pipes, and they're not going to move anytime soon.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
So I'll take it out to the public. Is there any public comment on this item, item number 10? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for final discussion. I will say that, having participated in the recruitment and hiring of Greg Norby and believing that he brings to us an amazing amount of technical expertise in running our sanitary district, that I'm inclined to rely on staff's recommendation for this. I believe in the future it would be helpful for everyone to see the dollar figures. I don't think that was willfully omitted. I think it was an oversight. And I think now you know how we roll. We want to know the dollar figures. And if you are not selecting the lowest bidder, staff justification for that decision would perhaps expedite this. I think adding another layer of process on, as you say, when we're going to have all these other projects, is not a good idea for this district right now.
You'll never get through $21 million a year.
Yeah, but I also think this is a pattern of discussion that we have with every major expenditure of money, and I actually am not sure that any process would change that if this is part of our process.
I'm not asking for a change of process, I'm asking.
With all of that
Okay,
said,
I've asked for that as well.
with all that
You
said,
know, if in fact Newt would have been left in, and the numbers came out, Newt would have been the second highest bidder, they would have gotten the bid. So, I mean,
It's not a bid.
we, I don't know, it seems to be.
RFP, usually three
We created some
contractors
animosity
are kept for an
with
RFP.
Newt Engineering that we
Well,
didn't need to create.
Okay, so I want
I don't
to say
understand
one
the pitch
thing
here, but
is
anyway.
that we didn't, you can go ahead and get the, whatever vote's going to happen, but I don't feel that we've cleaned up from where we're going to go from the next bid and the next bid.
Whoa.
It's
It's
an RFP process.
No,
It's
no,
not a bid.
no. What I'm saying is, after all this discussion, heated debate, we still don't have, what is the goal not to come back to the similar process of some of us not trusting, we're not getting enough information to make, that's what I'm
That's
saying.
not
There's
on
no-
the agenda, we should probably put that on the
Right.
agenda and separate this, get through this, and
Right.
then
I'm
come
not
back
saying
with a
it's
proposal.
not-
So with all that, I'd
It's
like to
not
make a
done.
motion.
It's not done. It's not over, which is
I've
unfortunate.
got 3 action items related, okay? I'm gonna look into, facilitating an independent review board and bring you guys some findings and recommendations. We're going to make it standard practice to include this type of information that shows you can see the range of the outcome of the results, and then an explanation of further recommendation, which we do try to provide already. And the third thing I'm actually going to suggest is that, and if this can be done by Julie's firm, it can be done by somebody else, is that to simply provide you guys an excerpt of the key parts of state code that deal with these processes, so you have them handy to reference, and between those, hopefully, some of this is helpful. So those are 3 things we'll do independent of what else happens this evening.
I think I already sent that out about the difference between an RFP and
You
a
have
bid.
it, but you probably should send it again.
Well,
You
we'll
have
pull it
two
together.
new
and-
board members coming next month.
Yeah, and the one thing that I do want to say is I want to be able to work with staff when we release numbers, because under the Public Records Act, the proposals and the submittals aren't public until there's been a recommendation of a contractor for that submittal. And because if you release that information before there has been a recommendation, but once it's recommended to the board or the council, then that information does become public. But if you release that too soon, and it's in the public record, you're bidding against yourself.
And it skews the
And
process.
it's the McKellar case, which is, and so,
And
and.
it couldn't be in a board packet? The ones
Well,
the recommendation-
what's the recommendation? It could be, but we do not, because what we do not want to do is get the information on all the other people that are responding out in the public, because until we've made a recommendation.
3 or 4 days ahead of, 6 days ahead of.
And once the staff has a staff report and made a recommendation, then we can release that, but you do have to be careful, and I'm
So
sure
I
you're
have a
aware of
motion
that
on the floor.
issue.
One last thing. I appreciate you saying all those things, and I'm not going to be here for it, but I have implicit trust in the process, and I don't think that, except for putting the numbers in the packet, I don't think the other stuff is necessary.
Thank you, Peter. So I'd like to make a recommendation to adopt resolution 14. I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution 14478, approving for your fiscal year.
No, that's not what you need.
You want the contract?
You want the next item.
I'm on 10? Oh, no.
And we're only on 10.
Sorry. Add to the packet?
I lost it. Is it
It's
10
after
or
the
11?
maps, to accept the proposal from Harrison Associates.
Item 10.
Yeah,
Yeah, where is
item
it?
10, and then there's 2 maps, and then it's on the
Oh, I
next
messed
slide.
up my.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah, it got finished.
Well, it's 2 pages after this, so it's.
Yeah, it's the maps, and then it's on the last
Yeah.
one.
Okay, so doing that. I'm working with vertigo, you guys, so it's not good. Thank you.
My recommendation is to make a motion to accept the proposal from Harrison Associates and authorize the general manager to execute a professional services agreement in an amount not to exceed $538,681.
Second.
Wasco Sullivan. I'll say that we should take a roll call vote, is my request?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Director May, what do you vote?
Abstain. Do not have enough information.
Okay. Director Sullivan?
I vote yes.
Director Guasco?
Aye.
Director Eger?
No?
And President Sullivan?
Aye. The motion passes. Item number 11.
Okay, this is, sorry.
I don't even need to announce it. You can just.
Sorry. I
Or consideration of
apologize.
approving contract amendment number 2 with Harrison Associates to review and update the RBSD standard specifications and drawings.
So, what this service is for is the district has not updated what we generally refer to as our standard specifications and drawings in going on about 20 years now. And so what we've been doing year after year is sort of scabbing on short-term modifications here and there. And the whole idea of having standard specifications and drawings is that you can hand them out readily, you can use them in design projects so you're not reinventing the wheel. And it's a standard set of most public agencies that have infrastructure like water, wastewater, streets. You typically have in your tool chest what are called standard specifications and drawings. And they're on your website, and contractors can go to them, et cetera, so everyone knows how you want your infrastructure built. Ours, like a number of our administrative type items, has gotten way out of date over the past roughly 20 years, and we have simply not been able to get to this item. But the work, as we wrapped up the work on Group A and B, and we realized we're just going to keep having to redo some of these if we don't just bite the bullet and do an update like we should have been doing about every 5 years. So what you have in front of you is a staff recommendation to have an update of our drawings and specifications done so that we can use those repeatedly going forward over the next, say roughly 5 years. And given the familiarity with the work that's just been done over the past year on groups A and B, this seemed like an efficient, basic extension for Harrison Associates to go ahead and wrap up for us since their team has been mobilized and on site, and essentially go ahead and produce those standard drawings and specifications for us. We would then adopt them, and they would become our standards for contractors and anyone else who's working on RBSD-owned infrastructure. So that could be, anything from lateral replacements to, PG&E to MMWD working around our lines or what have you. So that's what this is about. It's a pretty nuts and bolts kind of item, but it's gotten, again, about 2 decades out of date at the district. And this service is to basically complete an update to those engineering drawings and specifications. You have attached to the staff report basically a scope of work, basic letter proposal from Harris spelling out how they would complete the work. You have a cost table near the back that shows the basis for the $45,800 cost and the labor hours and so forth. This was work that, if it were approved and completed, we would hope that by the time we do our next annual gravity sewer rehab contract, we would save quite a bit of money because the engineering firm we hire wouldn't have to, again, go back to our cobbled together set of specs and standards and try to make it work for the new job. They would take these off the shelf and plug them in, as would the contractor after that. So this is basically kind of a long-term investment. But it doesn't take that long. The work is done in like a 6 to 8 month window. And so essentially by late next calendar year, all of our future projects will reflect the benefit of having these updated standards and specs. So that's what the work is all about, and I'll hand it back to the board.
Now, is this describing what our system is?
No.
Is it?
Right.
I feel like I'm not understanding.
Well, because you don't do this, there's no reason why.
How we want it,
How we-
what
yeah.
pipes we want to be used,
Exactly.
how we want everything.
What kind of backfill.
What's your standards?
And this is what you'll find in most public works offices. And if I was gonna go work on your street and install a sewer lateral for you, I would come to this and I'd say, oh, well, Ross Valley owns that line. What are all the things I need to know about what types of equipment, what types of fittings, what kind of backfill to use? It's just what it's drawings. Here's how we like our valves put in the ground. It's very basic nuts and bolts stuff. is
For
what it
lateral
is.
replacement and for
Yeah, sure.
contractors doing our work.
Manholes, clean outs, you name it.
And that is 20 years old?
This was last updated, well,
Yeah.
roughly, 1996 was the last official update. So
1996, 1995.
that's just an example.
Board members, questions, comments?
Is there, go ahead. Is this all electronic now? So
Yeah.
So it's put into some
It will
kind of
be.
a, and so when we do something, we can measure it and put it into a spreadsheet and track everything according to our standards?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, if you have I understand what you're saying, but
Well, one of the nice things about having the modern era is that we can track everything. And so if we have a update of our standards and they're electronic, when we do a project, we fill in all the stuff that's in the
Bring
project
it
and it
over.
all brings
Right.
up, okay, good, thank you.
Frank,
Sorry, I was not clear.
Could we include in this some language that would include the latest data available on sea level rise within the jurisdiction of Ross Valley Sanitary District? Perhaps
Some standard drawings or
some
references?
standard drawing or reference or BCDC map that says 40 years from now, this is going to be
Yeah,
integrated.
I don't see why not, Frank. Yeah.
Simple stuff,
Yeah.
nothing.
No, I think it's actually a great idea.
Off the shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah, make sure the right materials and the right methods are in
The Bay
place to
Conservation
accommodate
Development maps regarding
Right.
potential sea
So when
level.
you pick up a future level version of that from the Ross Valley, it's
Mhm.
going to have a section that says basically heads up, these are the official projections, these are the
And these
areas.
manholes will be underwater.
Yeah, no, it's a readily doable, obviously we can only work from the best.
Watertight components on all structures and assets.
Can
Can I ask a question? Yeah, there's watertight solutions already now.
By reference.
Okay, so I live and breathe by that standard specification for construction of sanitary sewers and private sewers in this county. The Ross Valley Sanitary District made the most modern improvements to it, and then the county brought it in, and Newt did most of the AutoCAD and all that. The district has made more changes than anyone else locally, and frankly, the local sanitary districts didn't adopt those standards until much later, and it's almost a conformity. I've got problems with those construction specs. I know anyone that's read them that knows anything about this knows that there's a lot of outdated information. So the sewage ejection system, standard drawing 7, circa 1996. That is a public sewer wet well with a submersible pump with gate valves and check valves on the inside of the sump. We're changing that in Sausalito right now with our staff engineer and updating those drawings because we can't wait because there's so many jelly beans and cardboard systems out there that have been plugged into the walls of whatever, not hardwired and not properly rated control panels, that there's better systems now. So there's even better package systems that would fit the bill. So I've got some great stuff in Sausalito I've been working on that. Those lateral materials tables on page 91 of your PDF, let's say. Okay. The materials that are still allowed, cast iron, DR26 PVC, DR21 C900, you're not going to find that stuff easily. I mean, at least DR21. Go to DR18 C900. Get rid of the cast iron. It rots. It's garbage. They shouldn't even be selling that stuff anymore.
So these are all deficiencies.
Well, that's what I'm doing in Sausalito. We're getting rid of that garbage.
Right.
We're just,
But it's not pertinent to the
the contract.
I understand that, but they're gonna be working on this
Well,
spec.
but I understand your point, because, and I've heard some of this history, there's a widely used set of quote standard specs and drawings out there that were produced, they've been sitting around. We're in the same situation a lot of other agencies are. We're using outdated information, and so each project comes along, we're having to custom fix what's not right about the current specs and standards. So the problem we're fixing through this action is the same problem that Marin County and most of the cities
Right.
eventually have to handle as well, they just haven't gotten to it
Well,
yet.
I want
Because they're
conformity
using
in the
stuff
county,
that is-
that's what I want.
Right, but am I understanding what you're saying
Yeah.
correctly? Okay, I just wanted to see if that was.
So I won't go through the whole list of stuff, and what I'm really doing is saying,
Page 92.
let's collaborate. Let's collaborate, all right? I support this, by the way.
He'll,
Well, you're gonna do
he'll
this
have
with
some free
CMS
time next
policy.
month and start.
Yeah.
It's already built in.
I'm selling my pitch right now, before I go out the door.
All right, any other board member comment on this before I take it out to the public?
Yes.
Okay.
The pipeline materials, are we, and I know we've talked about this before, Greg, are we going to look at potential pipeline materials that are environmental?
Friendly.
Yes.
Yeah, and
I know they're gonna cost more, but
I'm not very heavy on that, other than recycled materials, Pam, so I can't really speak well to it. I think if we can find suitable materials that pass all the necessary specifications and standards, and not to get too technical, but these would be things like ASTM testing and so forth. By all means, we want to be using, sustainable products. I can't really speak, if they're in very, I don't know, Vern, can you expand on that at all?
Well, holistically, when we look at our green, the carbon footprint or how our construction can be most efficiently done, not only the trench material and the pipe material, which are important, using recycled aggregate, using rubberized asphalt, although that's not really applicable unless you have large quantities where you can use shredded tire material for AC. But just the fact that you're doing CIPP restoration of your pipelines, you are saving all kinds of construction effort and impacts to the community by just doing that. That's a green technology that we don't even realize, really. Pipe bursting, you're avoiding construction, import, off-haul of materials, all of the diesel construction that you're going to be consuming doing that work. And the fact is, by doing pipe bursting, you've avoided all that. So holistically, when we look at what we're trying to do to rehabilitate the system, it's not only just to try to use a pipe material that is, BCP, they've been using it since Roman times, right? But it actually has its pluses and minuses in the kind of ground that we have with cracking and, of course, the downside of infiltration with a brill pipe material. So there's a lot of weighing pros and cons with the kind of materials that we would use to try to keep a green attitude with the rest of
but
the
that would be part of this direction.
If
is
there-
to
yeah,
look over-
there's suitable
we
products.
actually talked in this board about buying products or materials here as opposed to out of the country. We've had a discussion here, so I just wanted to make sure we're all going to cover all those bases.
Yeah, things like whether the standard domestic purchase agreement requirements and so forth. Yeah, we'll touch on
And,
those.
And I'm not sure, this is a bid, right? This is not an RFP?
No, we're proposing this as an add-on to their current contract. So this is an amendment to Harris's current contract. They're just now finishing up the work on Group A and B. So they've been doing our design and working with our specs and drawings.
So there's a different contract prior?
Yeah, sorry, it's a little confusing.
Not the contract we just
This is
duped out.
correct. This is work to just have them wrap up for us under
Okay.
their current contract.
Okay, that's why I was just trying to figure out how were they, okay. Yeah, let's see if I have
So country of origin, is that something that we could require, products made in the USA?
I'm sorry?
Canada, Mexico?
Source
Projects
like
made in the
US
USA?
requirements.
Sure.
Is that going to add a lot to the cost of the project?
No, most of the stuff is domestically made. We don't have any really exotic stuff that might be shipped in. But, you know, we do have a lot of stuff from China. I mean, you know.
I was,
getting
you know, you
valves.
read about the Chinese steel and a big
Yeah.
bridge, and that bridge is gonna come down one day, so.
Right.
You have to be careful about,
I know.
you have to be careful with an absolute buy American, you have to look into, you can do it by product type.
Yeah, what I was going to suggest, and again, you guys could probably, is that's something that you want to probably best handle on a project-by-project basis rather than a set of standards and specs, because it can vary quite a bit based on the type of project. Does that make sense? So I think this has come up recently, and I know we answered questions about it last month. Probably what we need to start doing is just clarifying for any major construction project that we're putting out, whether or not it has any specific requirements of that type. You know, either made in USA sourcing or what have you, because we can do that, but there are trade-offs, as we can imagine. So we'll start specifying for you if there are any, and then if there's any issues with it, we can talk about them. But I think to Vern's point, you're more likely to run into that kind of stuff when you start to get into mechanical equipment, specialized systems that might be made in other countries. We're basically working in, for the most part, concrete, dirt, and pipe. So it's mostly domestic.
Okay, anything else from the board? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
So move to approve contract amendment number 2 with Harris Associates to review and update the Roswell Sanitary District standard specifications and drawings.
Second.
Baker Sullivan.
At a cost of $45,860.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Item number 12, consideration of adopting ordinance 66, regulating the maintenance of private sewer laterals. Greg.
And it's probably gone to sleep, so give me 1 second here, and then we'll fire this up. So while this is...
I'm going to stay for this.
Good.
I've done these for other agencies
Yeah, this
as
is a
well.
big
So,
deal.
yeah, no, I'm curious. Don't let Jasmine go home to her kids.
All right, give me 1 sec here. So this is kind of a continuation of the discussion that we had at the last board meeting, where we got into, we basically talked about more of a multi-pronged program type approach to the challenge of I&I reduction. And so one of the key aspects of that, we covered a lot of ground last time. But one of the key features of the kind of what we're calling the sort of this multi-pronged approach. If I can get my darn thing to go.
Here you go.
Oh, thank you. It doesn't show up on here for some reason. Okay. We know that, so first of all, let me recap. Some of the key points that were made when we talked about this last time was private laterals are essentially an extension of our infrastructure, even though they're private. They're estimated to be somewhere around 40% of all the I&I. We know that they are a very common source of debris and blockage materials that come into our system, things like rocks, roots, dirt that get built up and then come out as a sludge. We know that because of their very nature, they're simply more subject to degradation because they're on steep hillsides on private land. They often have trees and landscapes, digging into them. So effective long-term wastewater collection system overhaul cannot really be done without addressing laterals. So that's why we are talking about this. We reviewed some of the lessons learned last time, which is, hey, we've been doing the grant program, but we're not getting too far with it. And we want to look at more of a multi-pronged approach. I've already kind of covered some of this. The issues presented by private laterals, they are a high source of I&I. They put the public system at risk. They are definitely a level of service issue when they're blocking up and not providing the service that the homeowner, the property owner was expecting. We're going to cover shortly some of the highlights of the proposed ordinance, and let me actually be clear. What you're considering this evening is an update to a very out-of-date kind of hodgepodge of ordinance languages in the district code that deal with private laterals. They are probably on the order of, well, I don't even know how many decades out of date. So we are going to be proposing an ordinance that consolidates and significantly updates all of the key requirements dealing with private laterals. So it's a very, very important step, and we're going to go through each of those one at a time. So again, kind of a quick recap. We have about 15,000 laterals, and that adds up to about 200 miles of pipe. So it's almost, we talk about our system having 200 miles of pipe. That's the pipe we own. So think of it as like a parallel system with another 200 miles of pipe connected to ours. They're typically older. They're more susceptible to failure. We covered a lot of this last time. And typically the homeowner doesn't do anything with these until it's catastrophic. They don't go in and preventatively maintain these. They only do something when you know what.
When it's at their feet.
Right, when they have to. So things have basically failed by the time something actually...
Can we do smoke tests on private
Exactly.
without their permission?
Yeah, well, we're going to get to that in just a second, Craig. And again, as it's pointed out, yes, we're cleaning and maintaining the public sewers, but one of the problems is that the poor condition of these private laterals is continually loading our system and putting it at risk because of the debris, the roots, et cetera, the rocks that are coming into our system because of the degraded private laterals. So the bottom line, the failing private laterals decrease the level of service for our customers, and they increase the rate to all ratepayers. Because when we talk about that 40% of flow that's I&I, everybody's paying for it. Pardon me. It's a shared cost that we'd rather not have. Okay, industry perspective. And Vern alluded to this earlier. Wastewater utilities have been wrestling with the issue of private laterals for at least 10 plus years now, since a lot of the regulations tightened up. And all over the country, they've been trying different approaches, and one of the few things people have learned is that there's no silver bullet. You need a multi-pronged approach. And it makes sense if you think about it. Think about Ross Valley. We're trying to go motivate 15,000 individual property owners to go take care of something. People that have better things to do with the time and their money to take care of the sewer level. So trying to move the needle on something like a lateral program is no easy task. This is basically what it boils down to. So you need to use everything that you can get your hands on. Capital projects, ordinances, grant programs, etc. So in the Bay Area, East Bay Mud is, I think, widely considered to be have made the most progress on this, and it was no easy battle, or no easy achievement, I should say. It was a very long and contentious process, but they've essentially achieved what they were out with. At least the pieces are in place. They have a very aggressive program. Guess what? It was helped along. It was helped along by the federal regulators, the EPA. But it is now in place, and their member agencies are busy installing this. And it's very interesting. They're still learning lessons about what works and what doesn't work over at East Bay Mud. So they're a great resource, by the way.
It just was passed, I think, last year.
Yeah, I think it's really fairly new.
I've been tracking it.
Yeah, and it's a very large. This is a program that's going to take, really a decade.
It's a huge service area.
Yeah, and it's a huge service area. Sausalito, in terms of Marin County, has the most established program and is considered very successful. And currently, actually later this week, SASM is going to be considering a similar action with their ordinance update, just by coincidence. And if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, the Marin County Grand Jury report that just came out the other day, one of the notable findings in that Grand Jury report is that they strongly recommend that all wastewater utilities in Marin County actually adopt ordinance features of the type that we're going to talk about here shortly. So This is not fringe activity anymore when you talk about things like point of sale and so forth. Everyone has recognized that these are the things that have to get done if you're going to make any dent in the private lateral problem. So kind of covered this a little bit. We actually showed you this slide last time, but you can see the yellow are programs that include transfer of ownership, point of sale for inspection and or testing. And a lot of that stuff on East Bay is, of course, part of East Bay Mud. You can see in our area, Belvedere, Sausalito, and then others do not include transfer of ownership, but they may have other requirements such as remodeling and things like that, which vary.
I think Steege is the oldest one on the East Bay with an established program.
I think you're right. I think Vivian may have mentioned that. So the good thing about that is we've got lots of folks to talk about lessons learned and what's worked. Okay, so the ordinance that you have in front of you, what are the highlights? So first of all, let's be clear about the difference between inspection and testing, because we use the terms quite frequently. They're two different things. Inspection is what it sounds like. It's running the CCTV camera down the system, looking at the physical condition and assessing it, producing a report.
$250 about what it goes.
Yeah, something in that range, Frank. There's plenty of vendors that can provide it. Basically what we're going to be saying is anytime, what's going to trigger a mandatory inspection? Well, if you have a sanitary sewer overflow or a lateral failure that the district is aware of, it can clearly attribute to the condition of your lateral. If there is reasonable basis for a public health threat because of the condition of your lateral, or if there is a transfer of ownership. Now that doesn't necessarily mean a sale, because transfer of ownership, could be to, a family member or a trust or something like that.
Okay, can I just
Yeah,
ask
please,
you,
please.
I encourage you to use also a construction project upgrade to the property.
We have that.
That's,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
don't use the word remodel. That is an upgrade to the property.
Greater than
Because a
certain-
remodel is not a new building, and also, there's projects out there where a whole landscape project will have, cost triggers are the way to go with that.
And we do have a cost trigger.
Okay, but the point is an upgrade to a property, because it limits you to a construction project on a structure that's a dwelling unit or whatever,
Right.
or,
Right.
okay, otherwise a landscape project will go underneath your radar, and it could be terraced and compromise the existing lateral.
Okay. And Randall,
That's what we're doing.
you'll probably comment on this better, but right now, the existing language, if you look at what's out there already, it's 50% or more of the floor area.
Right, it follows the California Building Code.
Right, so 50% or more of the building floor area structure is being impacted by a remodel of any kind. That's already triggering an inspection. A test.
But
Big
a
difference.
property with a sewer line will be impacted by construction outside the structure, and frankly, I know so. I
So,
do a lot.
so basically, anything above a certain dollar value. Let's come back to that.
That's what I'm trying to explain.
inspection or just testing?
Inspection.
Inspection, okay. So testing is not the same as inspection. Testing is actually pressurizing the line, making sure that it doesn't have, egregious leaks. That has to be observed and documented, et cetera, to make sure that it's not going to be a source of the water's not just going to be flowing out of it. We're going to be looking at the provision of authority to complete repairs if it's an emergency and the landowner is unwilling to or unable to act on it. So these are obviously worst case scenarios. These are not light things. And there's allowable exceptions for new or previously certified laterals. And so, for example, once we pass this, if you've already shown you've taken care of your lateral, and then you do a point of sale, you're not going to have to do a re-inspection.
So you'll have a certificate of compliance.
Something to that effect. Am I describing that correctly?
You're describing correctly.
Yes. Okay.
But we maintain, the district.
Right, because we have the records on
We
it.
have the records. We know.
Yeah.
Because they had to get a permit from
Right.
us.
What we do is we issue a certificate of compliance, and for repairs, they're good for 3 years. For replacement, they're good for 10 years.
Right.
and you're gonna have trouble with industrial and commercial properties.
Tracking
So residential building reports can be held back in local MS4s, and the certificate of occupancy won't be issued until the work's completed. So you have overarching jurisdiction over them, right?
Over the MS4s? Or
Yeah.
I believe the MS4 is administered by the county and the local towns.
Right, so what I'm saying is you're gonna have to be able to have jurisdiction over commercial, industrial, and residential. But point of sale, in other words, it's gonna have to say that every building, every property that has a sewer line, it falls within this jurisdiction, your ordinance.
They do.
Right?
They do.
Because that would be correct, yes,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they all fall within the rough
Okay.
idea.
Yeah, yeah, no, good questions, they do. Okay, this graph, I wanted to come back to it because to the topic we were discussing earlier about the budget, actually. This is what I was getting at. You saw this graph last time, and now it's going to have a little more context. By adopting the recommended ordinance, well, first of all, for context, remember, 15,000 laterals. Even at looking at like a 25-year window to eventually try and get these, at least the first cut at upgrades, you're looking at some pretty aggressive numbers on an annual basis. And how are you going to get that? Well, that's why you need the multi-pronged approach. And this shows you estimates. They are estimates, but they're based on activity. We know what goes on in the community of how you would achieve that. So this is a little bit out of date. This was emphasizing that from our data, upping the grant to 4,000 is going to increase participation. But then by having ordinance language that allows us to aggressively respond to SSOs and stoppages and get inspections done and testing if necessary, remodels and change of ownership, these are accounting for, as you can see, somewhere around 50% of the necessary progress. So they are critical elements of the program, having the ordinance language that is being recommended. That's what that graph is basically showing you. Minus these, you're basically doubling to 50, 75 years the cycle that you think you're going to get around to tackling the models. And I'll remind you one other thing. I don't think the slide is in here, but we showed you a slide last time that showed the avoided long-term capital costs at the treatment plant of reducing I&I. And the point of that graph is that when you're looking out 5, 10, 15 years, and I just heard a news article on this the other day, the regulators are coming to the plants and telling them you cannot blend anymore.
No more blending.
We're not going to make you stop tomorrow, but heads up, it's coming. Okay? Knowing that that's coming means that when, as members of CMSA, pick your number, I don't know what it's going to be, but we're looking at somewhere in the $50+ million capital program eventually to address the regulatory requirements that will no longer allow or significantly restrict blending, which means the more you solve I&I, the more you avoid those future capital costs. So that's, I think, a very important long-term investment. Okay, so.
Can I add one quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Please ask a question.
This is something I've been following with a few things outside of here. They also had included in their ordinance was the older housing stock. That if the house was a certain year, that was another part where there had to be an inspection. The older the house was, it's on their website.
Okay.
So you may want to consider that. I mean, we are.
Yeah, certainly the age of housing stock makes a
Yeah.
big difference.
Okay.
Yeah, no question.
I
Okay.
think, Greg, and also, I don't mean to keep belaboring things, but as far as the program for replacement and repair and all that, and there's an emergency and we are responsive to a challenge that someone is not responsive to, like a property owner.
Right.
I think I heard you say something to the effect where the district have in the ordinance language embedded in it the ability to mitigate
Yes.
a challenge. So our way of being made whole on this is lien language or something, if we never get paid
That's the
by.
end of the road, yeah.
Okay, I'm just checking.
Yeah.
Like
And
a
then
like a
obviously
property
it's not
sale
something we
occurs,
do
or
lightly, yeah.
maybe a nuisance abatement
Yeah.
process?
Yeah, that's, that's your last resort.
Okay, just curious.
Okay, so the staff recommendation, pretty simple. We are recommending adoption of the ordinance number 66. For those reasons, it's gonna be key to accelerating the lateral replacement programs. We know from the data, you're gonna see reduced sanitary sewer overflows. You're gonna see long-term reduced costs that are driven by the I&I for capacity expansion. You're gonna see lower day-to-day operating costs. Remember, every gallon of water comes in our system, we pay a pump, treat, and put back into San Francisco Bay. So there's no mystery there. Improved level of service for the customers, because what's good level of service for the customer? Out of sight, out of mind, reliable. And failing laterals don't quite pass that test. And then lastly, it does address the objectives established by the regional board in the CDO. And as you can see, it does have pretty widespread support these days amongst public agencies, which is a real sea change from 10 years ago, but I think that's the new reality we've all recognized. When someone like the EPA can come into East Bay Mud and say, you shall, we know the reality has shifted a little bit. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. We'll open up to questions. Again, the motion before you is adoption of the proposed resolution.
How can we get all the changes in that we discussed tonight? Like age of houses and all that stuff?
Well, let's
Yeah, I don't-
recap them quickly and write them down.
All right, board members, questions, comments?
Well, we'll have to bring it back, there's changes, yeah.
Well,
What if,
most of what you've addressed, I think, are, they're very much.
Editorial.
Do they have in their ordinance included the loan program too?
Who's they?
East Bay.
I don't know. I can find out very easily.
Because I've been talking to Judy, and they have a loan program at Las Colinas. That's probably separate.
Yeah, the data we've
That's
heard
your
is, lots of activity on grants, not lots of activity on loans. But that's, could change someday.
So this says two things. It says we're gonna add the cost of doing stuff to the sewer charge that's issued by the county.
Correct,
And we can put a little on project.
correct.
Yeah.
So we will get this fixed. And we think we'll get
Yes,
fixed.
yes. It gives us teeth, because in the past, that's what we've lacked.
Right.
We had no teeth to really say, and I'll give you an example. I forget the name of the neighborhood. It comes up all the time. There's a little cul-de-sac with like 7 houses. All the laterals are in terrible shape. Ivy Lane. We know that these laterals just dump rocks and stuff into our lines, and we know they're going into our lines. We videoed it. We know they're bad. We've offered.
You can't do anything about it.
Correct.
We can now.
We can if we have some teeth. Right now, all we can say is say, pretty please, you're really screwing up our systems. And we,
So that brings up a good point. Now is the perfect opportunity to put in your capital project latitude to take care of the low laterals in the public right of way, and then return them to the property owners when your project's completed. And you can use your
Right.
sewer lateral grant program to help pay for that, for the lower lateral, and also encourage them to replace the
Right.
upper lateral.
and we're getting huge efficiencies by doing that. I think, if I understand.
Yeah, heck yeah, while you're mobilized in the roadway.
Well, if we're doing the lower lateral.
Right.
And I would suggest that we incorporate that as part of the entire inflow and infiltration
Reduction
reduction
program.
Right, sure.
We are bringing back to the board at the
Right.
board meeting.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So let me reiterate that. What you're considering this evening is one part of several aspects. It's a very, very important one, but it's one part. And what Randall just mentioned is another one. So we're going to be back to, for example, that'll be more of a policy recommendation that says, whenever the district does capital projects that involve, say, open cut or pipe bursting or whatever, we shall replace the lower laterals.
Within the public right of way.
Right, and that way we can plan for it in terms of financial planning and so forth, and we can do the outreach to the
Yeah, we do
customers.
both, whichever one's the recommended method, you can still do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was looking at the East Bay one now, they give 180 days for a sale to get that certificate, so they give you some time.
they give you time. Here.
Yeah, so,
So we don't hold up a sale of a piece of
right,
property.
right, so
Interesting.
this ordinance is they worked on it for years, but it's really well done.
This is East Bay.
What do they say
Yeah.
about the age of the housing? Pam? Do they-
That's what I'm trying to find. I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was built before 1950 something or 40s.
So 60 years or 65 years?
Yeah, there was
They
Just on-
require
Or
mandatory
how to get
testing?
the certificate,
No, yeah,
yeah,
no matter what, but
no matter what.
Just based on years of the home?
Well, we know when neighborhoods are built, for the most part, we don't,
But
there's
even
scattered
if,
houses
not
and
if,
things
but
like
not
that.
if you have, if you could prove that you've replaced it, for example, I
Yeah,
replaced
then,
my lateral.
and I did too. so-
And the house was
but-
built in the 20s.
But I know that Hillview, which was built in 54, 55, has had a handful of laterals replaced out of 130 houses or whatever.
Only because none of us know about it.
So I'm surprised that the Marin Association of Realtors is not in attendance.
Tell me about it.
Because
Because they
when
were
I,
3 years ago.
and when I went through the endorsement process during the election in 2012, that it was a litmus test.
Yeah,
And so, anyway, that,
yeah, I just did it.
and did they,
30 minutes, my entire interview was on the lateral. I had nothing else, with all the questions that I had done, the laterals, and I said, it's gotta have to happen. It's a health issue.
Well, I think that's the new reality, is that when they look around
They're
the
trying to ignore it.
industry, yeah, you
It's
can't.
hard to ignore disclosure items when you're selling a house. If a property owner owns a sewer line,
Yeah.
just like a termite report,
Well,
it's the same darn thing.
It's the timing of the sale. If this gives 180 days, I mean, that's a long time.
I think these ordinance requirements are kind of the new normal in California. And 10 years ago would have been a real different discussion. I think that you can see from the map of the agencies, things like federal EPA orders, this is not considered fringe anymore. It's really considered a good, solid, responsible thing.
Well, someday the feds are going to tell CMSA that it has to stop, well, yeah, it has to stop the flow coming in.
So I see 180 days as a huge mistake, and let me tell you why. When a property owner puts a place up for sale, they get a realtor to handle the transaction. There's a buyer agent who works for the buyer. They make a deal to set money aside in escrow to pay for the cost of it or a holdback for the replacement, because generally speaking, most of these folks don't even order the thing until they get into transaction and escrow. There's no reason to hold up the sale if the realtors go ahead and when they get a listing, immediately order the inspection. So they're allowed to wait until there's an offer to get a video inspection, and that's a complete waste of the public's time and money when you have staff working on these things to get a response out in arrears. So I don't go along with, having to do this for part of my job, I am responsible to the realtors under an agreement with the local Marin Realtors Association that has most influence in Sausalito to turn around a video inspection within 10 working days of delivery to the city of Sausalito after it's date stamped and received by us to get a response out. That frees up the residential building report or whatever report applies to the property to make it so they can go ahead and get their sale transacted. Now, if they get an offer, the day that they get an offer, then they order the report, that puts you way behind schedule, and what it really does is throw someone else out of queue.
And we don't have, to be clear,
Yeah.
we don't allow for that delay.
Right.
Well,
And so
the ordinance
if
says
you have enough
sale,
staff
not
to cover
putting
the
it up for
demand,
sale.
that's one thing.
But the ordinance says sale, not putting it up for sale. You can list this house and it can be up for sale for 6 months.
It's happened. And
Right, but the trigger is when it's sold.
Correct.
Yeah, well, no, the trigger is actually when you really think about it.
Well, that's not what the ordinance says.
It says, upon proposed sale of the property, the seller shall coordinate a lateral test upon the listing
Right.
the home for sale.
So when it's put up for sale,
On the listing, so.
it's on the listing, okay? So when an agent gets a listing for a house to sell, that's when that response has to be ordered. You shouldn't wait 180 days after the actual sale. That's not a good way to go about it.
The responsibility for the repair of the lateral that fails testing shall be mutually agreed upon by the property buyer and
All right.
seller.
And then please say property improvements. You're doing yourself a favor on the public, and also include commercial, industrial, and also residential. That covers all the properties with sewer lines, not just residential dwellings.
In the East Bay pad, it says building or remodel. Okay,
Good.
So that covers it. And
Yeah,
it's
well,
building
yeah.
or remodeling.
Well, I've just seen these huge landscape projects, you know, where there's fountains and pools and all this stuff. And then they just place a sewer line and the inspector isn't even called in when they're open trenching to,
So
you
the
know.
current dollar value that the regional board has been suggesting to us, I believe, is $75,000. So if we were to broaden language to say something like, property improvements exceeding $75,000.
75 or more.
Yeah, exceeding.
Okay, so, what do you think?
Yeah.
You should just look at
Okay, that
this.
captures everything.
The owner as defined by this includes any person having a legal title in any real property. So that
Right.
should get commercial, residential,
Yeah, it's every
industrial.
type of.
It helps to spell it out because it will be argued.
I guess they got it.
So the regional board, they're
With all
only.
due respect, counsel.
Yeah. And so I think we're covered at 75,000 these days is pretty low trigger, you know, it's really high.
That's awesome.
So.
I've seen higher ones that are not very effective.
Yeah. I mean, it's. Okay.
Sorry, Randy's.
Well, I was gonna say, after I mentioned to Randall, that I was the city engineer in Piedmont for like 16 years and left in 2006 when we were starting to do the program. Sat on those technical advisory boards of the seven cities that encompass the East Bay Mud program. So, yeah, I lived this for quite a while with them as we were doing our cease and desist projects on the main lines, but then we get to the laterals. And then, so, this is something that we discussed, you know, ad nauseam at the time. We're trying to figure this all out. You know, the $75,000 trigger, those were things that all the cities had to kind of somewhat agree to, but each city had its own ordinance. So I was just telling Randall I could share with you the Piedmont ordinance that we came up with, just to kind of be as a benchmark if you would like to see that. I mean, obviously, it's public.
Vivian tried this one, this is a local
Yeah.
Marin-based one. This is the Sazen one
Okay.
that we tweaked. but-
Well, no, get the.
I mean, just as a benchmark, but I mean,
Email it
and
tomorrow.
actually,
No, you can get it online.
I think you guys are doing the right thing with the lower laterals as well. As far as when your mains are going in to replace those lower laterals, Concord, Piedmont, you know, even though they don't have ownership of those necessarily because they're the homeowner's responsibility from the point of connection all the way up to their toilets. But it's just the right thing to do because then you don't have to worry about them digging up your streets to make a repair on their lower lateral or all kinds of other issues. And you know your system's going to be tight at least up to that point. Then you got to work on the upper laterals, and this program will do that.
A lot of times you can sell them right there on the project, the contract.
Did you put in an exemption at all? There's an exemption here for 10 years. If it was fully replaced in the last 10 years, then you were exempt. Is that in there?
Yes.
Okay.
You can sell or do upgrades to the property.
Yeah, it's meant to capture, if there's any indication you've already taken care of this.
That's a reward,
And
man.
you don't
That's a
need
good
to,
thing.
you don't need to do this, so yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I can't find the housing stock. Maybe they took that out.
I don't know that this, you know, we may not have had it, and I don't know
I don't
for
see
us
it.
if we want to, if it's really
I
necessary.
don't know if we really want to
Maybe
do
they
that.
took it out. 'cause I
Our-
can't
She's
find-
looking at the East Bay map,
Oh,
and
okay.
she's saying she's not seeing it.
Okay.
Okay, then.
All right, so does that conclude board discussion of this item? I'll take it out to the public. Is there any public comment? Yes. Mr.
Good
Marin.
evening, Steve Lamb, San Anselmo. It's not directly related to this ordinance, but does the district have any thoughts on educating, just general educating property owners that might encourage them or inspire them to do these things on their own without one of these triggers? It seems like it would be a good time to have some sort of an education, information component.
Yes, we do.
We've cycled through that. In the 6 years I've been on the board, we probably had 3 or 4 periods where we sent out lots of information.
And public forums too.
Public forums, but newsletters that saying, you know, and the announcements of the lateral grants. We had one time we put out 2 newsletters, and we had a whole host of people come in with.
But explaining some of these things that we're seeing here about 40%, 200 miles and.
I agree with you entirely, but I have discussions with my neighbors, and I spend 20 minutes with them, and I can't get them to understand what's going on.
But I think, you're absolutely right, we want to have a more broad public education and outreach campaign, and that would definitely be.
Partly without, we didn't get into that this evening because it's a whole other topic, but that's just the multi-pronged program. We're going to be coming in, for example, and targeting certain neighborhoods with smoke testing.
Right.
That's a great public outreach, tool, because suddenly they can see, oh, there's
It
smoke.
really gets their attention.
So your point is spot on. The challenge here is you're trying to motivate a private property owner to take on something that they'd rather not do. They got other things to do.
To spend money.
Yeah, so it's a tough sell. So anything we can do to make it easier or help them understand the benefits is only going to make our lives easier. So, that is absolutely key, I think.
The right person would be really interested. I like the spirit of the question. All right, I'll bring it back to the board. Do we have a consensus about this? Are we ready for this? Or I think we need to bring it.
90%, 95%, there's some language that needs to be adjusted.
Bring it back at the next meeting.
There's some numbers in there that don't make any sense. The 400A that's
Yeah.
in there, that doesn't make any sense. And,
Well,
So how do you want it handled, everybody?
should
we
we,
can bring it back next week.
Bring it back next week.
There's changes here that,
And I'll-
if I'm correcting
I'll
some
call the president
typos,
of the realtors.
if I'm correcting the 400As on page 5, that's fine. But if I'm adding more definition and more language, it has to be brought back.
But we could still adopt to make it happen. It's just,
well,
it's
you
gonna have to be
can't
amended.
do the ordinance. You can't do the actual ordinance unless you have the language.
Yeah, unless you have the
But
language in front of
if this language were to pass as is, we would be light years ahead for the next couple of years. And the changes you guys are describing are really, really minor editorial. My concern.
The changes are tonight.
Yeah, that would be
Well,
my.
no, but you would need to have the actual
can read it
ordinance
when
in
I
front
go.
of you for
right.
adoption.
We
because
have the
you-
ordinance.
So, you mean amend
No,
If you
no,
add a
no.
phrase, you add
No.
a phrase.
Yeah.
Material changes
We
need
do that
to
all the
come
time in
back.
cities.
No, you don't. Typos
Slow
and
down. slow down.
typos would
What
be
do we-
one thing, but material changes are another.
So far, we've talked about some comparative issues and pros and cons, but I haven't heard a specific concrete change that we really need to make. And I would caution against, I would really not let perfection be the,
Enemy of good.
enemy of good, yeah.
So the question, Pam said age, but we don't need to deal with age tonight.
Correct.
We do need to do the typos.
But that can be
That's just a typo,
that's-
okay.
And
Well, then,
reviewed by the next incoming board for any kind of.
no, it's gonna be passed tonight.
passed tonight, but typos or numbering is not material, but when you start changing definitions and requirements, that needs to be brought back and forth.
That's okay.
Well, then
I want you to.
So bring it back Wednesday.
Well, how much are we gonna change? We're not
I
changing.
think we're
We're not gonna change anything.
Yeah,
I'd
I think
rather,
we're
I'd rather
changing.
make the motion with the minor editorial
Did you
change.
say that 10-year certificate things in here?
Yes, there is proof, yeah, there's process for proof of having agents.
And what about people who cannot afford? Are we gonna?
Whole
Can't do that in here.
Whole
Not
other
this.
animal,
Yeah.
we can't.
Not an ordinance on that.
But your Lotto grant program probably will have something built into it for loans and so forth, when you do address that and make your changes in the future.
Although that's really hard to do.
It is.
So are we done with discussion?
You don't have an exemption clause
For,
for 10,
Old people.
if they had it fully.
we do,
replaced. You
we
did?
do,
Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yes,
I'm
yes,
just,
yes.
it's about, this is my
Sorry.
fade away, fade away. It's
Frank,
kinda
any
like-
more comments or nothing to add? Okay, Pam?
No?
All right, we got, are we
All right,
ready for you
so,
to?
I move that we adopt ordinance number 66, an ordinance of Sanitary District Number 1 of Marin County regulating the maintenance of private sewer laterals with the minor editorial
Yeah, the corrections to those.
corrections to the numbering.
The numbering, yeah, there was on page
Oh, there's
5.
something in here about changing the water meter.
That's a,
East Bay Mud does sewer and water. We only
That's
do-
right.
we only do sewer.
Alright.
so you don't know that ordinance that well. Those ordinances.
They have made changes. The other thing they did.
All right, we have a
They-
motion on, we have a
The
motion
other
on.
thing,
I'll second
they-
the motion.
excuse me, is that they announced to the community when it would start
Okay.
as a courtesy.
Okay.
So I think we should do that.
Okay, so we'll do some outreach and
Yeah.
advertisements? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you hear Peter's?
No, it's,
Okay, we have a motion and a second, Sullivan Egger. All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Does the ordinance have to be roll call?
Oh, it does, as a
Yeah.
matter of fact.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Lily
my
did.
apologies.
You're allowed to still blame.
Dr. Mace, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes, please.
Dr. Glasgow?
Aye.
Dr. Egger?
Aye.
So
Dr. Sulla?
Aye.
Right.
Yes.
These are not like the
That
town
was a big
ordinances
problem.
that have to come back.
But no, they always do one that's done.
Is that for all
People want
special
certain people-
districts?
I don't know.
I bet the flag has to,
Jolie?
Yeah, what?
That's all that is.
Most ordinances come back after 30 days.
No, not under the health
That's
and
a city.
safety, not under the
Department of
1923
Who
Act.
has it for the city?
All right,
Cities.
we are at agenda item number 13. We are at 10:05. I know Director Meggs has to get up
That's
early,
all right.
then, okay.
And this is the last item.
And it is consideration of contract with RGS for human resources management fiscal year 14-15.
How long do you think this will go?
Very quickly.
Depends on how many
I
everything's been changed.
Well, I would say this is coming back to us because we wanted it in collaboration or in connection with the budget that actually includes this. We approved an interim contract with RGS Services, and now we have reached the end of that bridge, and so this will go into place and will take us through all of fiscal 14-15. I don't mean to take anybody's thunder, but we also talked about this in the Human Resources Committee meeting yesterday, so I feel particularly welcome.
We had sent questions to be answered from that meeting.
That's right, there were some things that need to be
Right, so I
amended in
wanna know
the,
if
especially in
those
the matrix.
So you guys have any questions?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what questions you're referring to.
The board has various questions. Like,
Well, so when this was
You
before,
know what I'm talking about?
I think the items that came up last time were, number one, as was described, we didn't want to enter into this one-year contract without having at least seen the new draft fiscal year budget. So that was one concern. So we did an amendment just to continue to keep some funds available for them, for the work to remain. And that was taken care of, obviously. There were some questions raised about whether or not this included the long-term staffing needs assessment, and the answer to that was yes. There was a little bit of confusion that I take responsibility for, because between Sophia and I emailing back and forth, we had given you a slightly different version, so that did lead to some questions that I recall. But I don't recall anything substantive. It has very straightforward termination clauses. If we're not happy, it's a 30 or 60-day written notice, and we all go our own way. There's a very extensive work plan which tells you what the 6 areas they're going to focus on, which I think is very helpful. So it's largely unchanged from what we saw last month. Again, my recollection is we primarily postponed it out of concerns to make sure it was aligned properly with the budget, and that it did, we were sure that it included consideration of staffing, long-term staffing needs, which it does.
And it took into consideration the extended contract they're working under currently, including the costs associated with that.
Right, so
It
the
was
real
backed
clean,
out of the final.
yeah, so there's a real clean break. The way this works is the old contract basically ends June 29th, and none of those monies are any longer available. And July 1st, basically, they start operating under this contract, which has the not to exceed for the fiscal year of $200,000.
And that was 45,000.
Right, so those funds are only partially spent, and the rest of it won't get spent, because basically, whatever it is, 14 days, it will stop.
I got questions, Frank's got questions. I mean, do
If
we
you
want?
have some questions, let's see if
I'm
we get some
gonna-
answers tonight. If not, then thank you.
Okay, questions, board members?
I'm happy with this, no questions.
Done by me, I'm ready to go.
Okay, so, there was some questions, I believe, from the community about, I look on the last page, where is it? Page 14, it's Exhibit A, the second page after. It just says 105 an hour. If I remember right, the public had asked to break up how the hours were spent on various projects, et cetera, that there was just this kind of, it wasn't enough information. is what I'm trying to
This was a public person's comment?
I believe so. I have to look at the minutes. It might have been, I don't know. I'm telling you, after 10 o'clock.
Yeah,
So, you know, it's, because it's $200,000, and I do see it's really well done, where is it, when you, is that the first section?
What was the?
When you start talking about the work plan, but it still doesn't tell me how many hours or how much effort is going into these areas, and with a $200,000 contract, and I'm only bringing this up because of our history with Mr. Marin, that we had a contract, and I don't want to get into the whole gist of it, but we couldn't figure out what was being done for the amount of money we had contracted this person, because he was not giving his hours to us. And then when I asked for the hours, I don't want to go into all the politics, but we couldn't get the hours, and there wasn't much work to show. So tonight, I would really like to put this off. And that was actually brought up at the other meeting.
Did we have a table in the past?
I thought there was.
Well, what I gave you as far as the hours was the 200,000 reflects 26 hours a week of Annie's time and 12 hours a week of my time, for a total of 38 hours a week being spent during the year on these HR issues. And any given week, it's going to vary which issues we're addressing. And of course, we are providing on-site HR services, which means we spend a certain amount of our time in ad hoc conversations and meetings with managers.
Oh, I totally understand. But I have been through this path before, and we ended up having to pay off the person. There was a lawsuit, and I don't want to get into all of it. And the work, not to say that you're not going to do the work, obviously I assume you will, but the contract to me just doesn't seem tight.
If it makes you more comfortable, there is a record, and Wendy, I don't know if you want to speak to what the bills look like from RGS, but I mean, when we record the time that we are charging to be billed to Ross Valley, we also record what we were doing for that time. So it is available, and I think it's part of our standard billing process. I don't see the bills that often because they come to you and not to me, but I know that, you know, our billing manager expects us to present that.
I'm only aware of seeing a summary of
Okay.
the individual.
We can certainly provide it if that's something that you'd like to have as a documentation of what occurred.
It's got to be in the contract.
So there's an hourly rate for.
There's an hourly rate, and then there's a timeline, but the timeline is very ambitious, and I'm not clear how that much of an ambitious timeline reflects 200,000. Though I really don't know, because
Left for what? I didn't hear the last part. Left for.
how it reflects the timeline that is projected by a salary of $200. It's just, those parts are missing for me. And then also,
Mr.
trying to see how much time is allocated.
So sort of a budget breakdown.
She's looking for something. I just, a few comments. The dollar amounts, we need the dollar amounts in. But, for instance, Ross Valley Sanitary, this, I'm looking at page 4. Ross Valley Sanitary District has experienced a number of significant organizational changes in the past several years, including the turnover of general manager, board of directors, change in composition of the management team. Since I've been here, there's only been one change. You for Brett Richards.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I think to that comment, we were looking at the superintendents as
There's a whole
managers,
host
and
of-
there were some changes that occurred at that level, in fact, quite a few.
So I have really what you guys can do is show them a breakout of everything we've done and where the money's gone. That's what I'm hearing, and then how they plan on breaking out the money in the future to each discipline, and also the allocated estimated time, right? Because these are estimates, right?
Oh, thank you. So if there were a breakdown of the budget resources by the major activities, because I think what Sophia was getting at was the cost, the basis for the cost is relatively simple because it's a certain number of office hours per week of the two staff over the course of the contract. And those are the hours.
And they're documented.
Right, and those hours are documented and billed and reported on. And the activities that are going to be done with that amount of hours, but they're going to vary week to week, depending on where we are the things that you see in the work plan table. So I'm trying to think, we could try to give you an estimate of what the allocation of the money would look like.
Yeah, but also on the last page for the contract, it says the hourly rate does not include markup for direct external costs, which will be invoiced to the agency at cost.
Right, so that's standard expense markups.
Right, and then the position is one person listed on here, 105 an hour.
That's Sophia.
Right, I thought she just said
Annie
there's
is still
another person.
Annie is still working with us, and there should be a clause in that contract, and that's our standard clause that we're using that basically says, at my discretion, and I discussed with the manager of the organization, I can bring in staff to do work whose bill rate is equal or less than mine.
And you both would know that.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember seeing that one.
There's also some language about your involvement with labor negotiations. I thought we were using somebody separate.
The plan is to bring in some additional resources for labor negotiations.
So our
They would
HR will do
coordinate.
labor too?
We would have a team, so there'd be a coordination between RGS,
Oh.
but there's monies in the budget for similar to what CMSA is doing right now with a
Professional negotiation.
Yeah.
But you always have
Someplace
HR.
I saw some interviews that they're going to handle the interviews for who you would hire for
I saw that.
negotiation.
Well, I don't anticipate that we would be making that decision, but we would certainly coordinate and process where that decision is made.
Where did I see that? Here,
It's on April.
identify
It's on
and
April.
interview candidates for chief labor negotiator.
Right, that is an objective of achieving preparation for labor negotiations. It's not where the decision making. It's that activity needs to happen.
I think I'm getting it now, it's finally coming to my gut, but I really,
Coming into focus.
it's too much information, and it's like so busy. No offense, because busy is good, is what we want, it's where we're going. But I can't get a handle on, there's so much that you're doing, I feel nervous about it. Okay, that's where I'm going with it. To me, it's like, make like your priorities really clear, and then I can understand how the money's being divvied up. But this, I don't know. what do other people think? I mean, I just like, it just seems,
So
like, I don't know how,
I think it's gotta split off the dollar.
This
It's gotta fall in the dollar amount.
This is the work that's gonna get done. Is that-
Right, okay, that's a work program, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what this is meant to be. It's a
Yeah.
high-level summary because it's a year's worth of work. But there are specifics, there's tons of specifics in here.
Right.
The work that's gonna get done on training plans, on long-range staffing plans, administrative policies and systems. I mean, I guess I would suggest there's actually a fair amount of
There's too
detail.
much.
but I guess the priority, what are our priorities? What do we really need to, what's the most important thing to do? Where's the most amount of money for her hours?
They have
Really,
spent-
because I
Right,
don't see
right,
that.
right.
You see
Okay.
where I'm at now?
Yeah. So
That's
what
the
you
one
saw
like me.
about a month or two back was a written assessment where they said, after the first 6 months of working here and putting the fires out and assessing you, they gave you, there was a fairly lengthy report that was termed a SWOT report, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that report went through in great detail what RGS had learned and observed about the needs and problems and
Yeah.
priorities of the district.
I remember.
So the outcome of that was that the priorities for the work plan would be the 6 projects. So when you ask, rightfully so, well, what are the priorities? That if you look at the the left-hand side of this table, where it says project, think of that as priority. So priority is put into place an effective performance management system, get administrative policies and systems up to date, conduct a long-range staffing plan, support the 2015 labor negotiations. Those 6 items are the strategic priorities strictly related to human resources that they're going to be supporting over the next year. So that's kind of how the 2 pieces of information are supposed to fit together. I don't have the report in front of me. It was given to the board, I think, not last month, might have been the month before. But it's term SWOT analysis, and it talks a whole lot about what they've observed and what's the weaknesses and challenges of the district. So we're certainly not presenting a scope of work here that hasn't got a good foundation for it.
I just don't know what,
Is there anything about department head evaluations? I know we've evaluated you.
Right,
Right.
I
We're starting
wanted that to be brought up.
evaluation of the attorney.
I'm
I don't think has anyone else ever been
Everyone
evaluated?
is supposed to get an annual review, Frank. Everyone in the district is supposed to get an annual review. That would be under project number 1, performance management system, or behind.
In here?
Yeah.
As part of the
or
HR
behind.
function,
Number one.
employee
Yeah.
performance review.
That's under the general manager's
Right.
duties.
So
Personal
we would
confidential.
not, the board would not evaluate
Staff,
and
no.
other managers?
Board evaluates
Why
myself and legal
GM.
counsel.
Why not?
That's the
That would be a good Brent Ives question. Board members
Okay.
do not.
I thought he said yes.
Now
I went to that leadership.
in cities, that's called council
No,
manager.
I don't think he'd do
I
that.
will
He's too
find
well
out.
seasoned. to
No, but in all
take that.
seriousness,
No, I
Frank,
will
to your
find out.
question specifically, I don't want to gloss it over. The
Uh-huh.
district is behind on annual reviews. I specifically am behind on some of the staff that reports directly to me. We've talked a bunch about it. The larger issue for the district is that our, what we call a performance management system, which is things like annual reviews, how do we award merit increases, all that wonderful stuff. How do we really evaluate people relative to strategic objectives? None of that exists at the district right now. We have a horribly out-of-date performance management system. This is intended to start fixing it. That's it.
And I'll just comment that the board reviews the people that they appoint. So you review me and you review Greg, and you don't review staff. Greg is.
Well, somebody's got to review.
I need to, and I.
He does.
Well,
So
we
you,
know that.
and if you have an issue
Nobody's
with
been reviewed.
reviews, then you need to take it up with Greg through his performance, but you don't go down and you don't hire and fire employees, it's all through him. And if you don't like what he's doing, then you bring it up in his performance.
Yeah,
But
so
if you
if
don't
6
like
months
something
from
I'm
now-
doing, you bring it up in my
If
performance.
6 or 7 months from now, we haven't made significant improvements in the performance management system, I'm the person you want to hold responsible, well, by extension.
But it's just going to be department heads. We're
Yeah,
not going to start
basically.
evaluating the
No, no,
person
no,
who
no,
takes
no,
a
no.
dip.
Yeah, yeah. This
Well,
is-
that's department head.
Yeah, but board members will not be evaluating department heads.
Correct.
You've got your GM, that's your job.
Well, you were gonna evaluate, no, I'm not going to, but your evaluation is in October.
Yes, it's coming right up.
I thought it was September.
September.
So, is there, is
So
that,
I think a contract needs some dollars and cents. What employees are X amount of dollars, I mean, just,
Right.
we need some numbers.
Okay?
is there any public comment on this item? What I'm hearing is that we want a little bit more of how the $200,000 number was arrived at. Perhaps staff will be working on the project and hours. I mean, I'm thinking of just something we saw for the, one of the
I
hearings.
have to tell you, I
Yeah, it'd
do
be
not
really easy to
think
do.
I can give you for each of those projects that it will take 50 hours to get done. Part of what we do here is we are responsive to the human resource needs of the organization. If there are a bunch of sick people, workers' comp or FMLA, we will be diverted some of those hours to dealing with those problems before they try to move.
Not by
So
project,
can you
not by
put
project.
in here that you're gonna work 12 and get the number?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that would solve the problem, I think.
Yeah.
All we have is a $200,000 figure, here's the contract, $200,000.
Yeah, I mean, if that meets your needs, that's
That-
really simple.
I mean, I could go to.
That's a commitment I know we can stand by.
There's an Excel spreadsheet somewhere that put together
Sure,
the estimate,
absolutely,
and I
yes.
think that's what I'm hearing the board would just like a little more.
Well, nothing that's, I mean, we know that it's 38 hours a week
we'll ask that number.
of service.
Yeah.
It should have been broken down.
Okay, so maybe as a, as an exhibit attached to the contract of how
Sure.
okay.
Would
Okay,
you
so what do we-
mind,
So
bringing-
actually, at $105 per hour.
Okay, so what we're gonna bring back is a high-level cost summary of what's behind the $200,000. It'll be
Well,
attached,
what she's gonna bring.
it'll be attached to the contract.
Uh-huh. Can I,
And,
can I ask, do you mind giving your hours each month to a board report? You usually have a report, right?
Oh, if you want the
That would be
time that
great.
we've worked in the board report,
That would
we
be,
can include
that would be awesome.
Right,
Thank you.
so if you guys aren't aware, I mean, there is a monthly HR activities report. It's been being produced every month since they started. And they also report to the HR committee what activities they've been working on. So the concern, which I fully can understand from the history, that is there going to be some sort of rogue consultant out there just burning our money? The answer is no. We have monthly meetings. We have a standing committee to provide oversight. We have invoices that I review and Wendy reviews. So there's a fair amount of checks and balances as to where the money's going. But I would say that we can, I think what I'm hearing is it would help if we would add a simple attachment to this that would simply break down the numbers, show the office hours, and provide a basis for the 200,000. What I'd like to provide, or suggest to the board, is we can bring that back as a simple update to this contract. And if it was okay with the board, we would bring this back on consent with everything else as is, because I'm not hearing direction for other changes.
There's just one more change that needs to be made.
Okay, is that acceptable?
It's fine with me. Next week.
Just as long as it happens, that's the important part.
Next week.
Okay, so that's just
All
direction
right.
to add.
Okay, so
in.
two things. You're gonna modify addendum A.
Right.
And
So we
add,
have some- And then you're gonna add your invoices into your monthly.
the board reports.
Right,
Perfect.
perfect.
and anybody that works with the agency besides yourself, could you list their name?
Yes, I will tell you which
and
consultants and how many hours.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's how
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right,
One quick question. It says under reimbursement in terms of payment, I guess we're gonna get billed monthly?
Correct, we do get billed monthly now.
Billed monthly.
Yeah. And those get, like I said, they get reviewed by at least 2 people to get signed off on.
Okay, so there's no minimum per month, for instance, Jolie is
No,
$15,000.
there's no retainer or anything.
There's no retainer.
I can tell you right now, they do end up, I mean, they're in, I don't know if you guys know the basic setup. The basic setup is very simple. Every Wednesday of every week, Sophia and Annie are in the office, generally 8 hours a day. Staff knows they're there. Appointments are scheduled, meetings with department heads are held. We have a standing meeting that we do once a week to go over important items. So Wednesdays are HR days at Ross Valley Sanitary District. And everyone knows it, so the field crews can get in and get attention. She could meet with Felix and company on the union stuff. the regularity of communication and activity now, just having that one day a week dedicated to HR has been tremendous. So, anyway.
We asked for that. We wanted
Yeah,
that.
so if you want to know what's
We're very
going
happy
on,
with that.
is come in on Wednesday, and we'll be trapped in a conference room.
You won't see us, but we'll be there.
And we're not
Yeah.
paying for travel.
No.
Okay.
Are we paying for travel?
I just brought it up.
I don't think we know.
We're not paying for
There's
travel.
no travel clause in this contract.
I know, but we're paying people for travel.
Where I know that we're getting 8+ hours of their time at the office, because
All right, are we adjourning or are we moving on to general manager's report and verbal report by board members?
Why don't we put that on next Wednesday?
Okay,
Pick it up.
we will see you all next Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we are adjourned.